to the whole health coaching course at District 2. Tonight is going to be focusing on overcoming bias and trauma-informed care, nonviolent communication, and things like that, not just within coaching, but in general. And the reason why we're doing this first is the national board actually changed their standards to where self-management and regulation is now a part of their actual core competencies. So instead of starting off with what coaching is, we're starting off with kind of looking in some of that self-reflection and kind of going into that. So we'll go a little bit over what the course is, where we're going to be storing documents tonight, what are the standards and what are some of the things that are required for this course. And then we're going to jump into learning about bias, learning about trauma-informed care and nonviolent communication. Does anybody have any questions before we jump into all of this? All right, then let's jump on in. So the program overview, hold on, now let's start moving, everything's moving around. Okay, so the program overview, so you will be doing around 75 total hours of work or more. I want that to be known. I don't want it to be, misleading in any way. There is going to be work outside of class that you all are going to have to submit. The reason for 75 hours is that is the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching Standards, is you have to have 75 hours of total training. On top of that, you have to have an evaluation, which I'll talk a little bit more about that evaluation and what that's going to look like. That evaluation you have to have, and you have to have the date that you pass that evaluation before you can even apply for the exam. So to apply for the exam, you're going to need a certificate from this course, and you're going to need a past evaluation. And those will be needed to actually submit for the board exam. You have to be an active participant. And what I mean by that is we're going to be doing breakout sessions. We're going to be doing different types of Q&As and different pieces like that. So that's the reason why I say active participation is going to be needed. And also there's going to be a certain amount of courses that you cannot miss. And I literally put on the invite, cannot miss this course. The reason why you cannot miss those courses is because we are going to be going through coaching evaluations during that time. Well, let me take that back. Not coaching evaluations, but we're going to be learning the coaching model. We're going to be learning how to do that, and you're going to be getting evaluated along the way. After that, and in between those, you're also going to be submitting recordings, and we're going to pair you all up or put you up in with 3 different people. And then you're going to have to submit a 20 to 30 minute coaching session. And then we're going to evaluate you on those coaching sessions after we're done with all that. And then that will be your passing evaluation. So with that being said, you attend all of those courses that say you cannot miss it. There's only 3 of them that we have. And then after that, you'll be evaluated again, and that will be your final evaluation. And then we're going to have a lot of fun. So I want that to be known as well. Our goal here is to be as flexible as possible and also learn, get everybody here to be a coach, all those types of things, and really be able to move this program forward into D2. The goal behind this program, or maybe the long-term vision, would be that we have several certified health coaches throughout the district, and then they're all also contributing faculty to the advancing of the health coaching curriculum in our district. And what I mean by that is, hopefully we can run this course every single year, and then we're kind of the pioneers behind this, maybe evolving the course to fit District 2, hopefully implementing it with students, implementing it with the community and other areas like that, with parents, and really getting people on board with doing this. This isn't the only course that we're offering. This year, the goal is to implement our 200-hour yoga teacher training, which I know some of you all may be in that course as well. There will be some overlap with some of those courses for sure. So we'll talk more about that probably on the yoga side, more on the coaching, not on the coaching side. So if you have questions about that overlap, we can hold those until the next time we get together for yoga. Some other courses that we can roll out is change management, to be able to actually implement change and to be able to implement change from an organizational standpoint. So all the way from an individual all the way to organizational development, and to be able to sustain change within your organization. So, those are just some of the things that we're rolling out. Hopefully next year we'll be able to roll out more heart math and Tai Chi and some other different types of well-being activities that we can do on a large scale, and hopefully be able to integrate not just teachers and staff and students and our family members, but other community members as well. So that's kind of the vision of some of these courses. Let me see. So the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaches, right? So you got to have 75 minutes. That's supposed to be hours. But anyway, 75 hours of training, right? You have to pass the practical skills test. So from the very fundamental piece, those are the things. We will have quizzes and exams along the way. This is just to help you to prepare for the exam. This exam that you take is going to be a full-on licensure style exam. So you're going to go to a testing center and you'll sit down and take the test. So we kind of prepare people for that. I know hopefully some of you all are familiar with that process, but I understand that not a lot of people are. So we try to get people prepared and into that mindset throughout the course. Another thing that we would like to do long term, and I don't know if we'll be able to do it for this cohort, but one thing is we have a testing center inside of District 2 to where we could actually have a practice exam to where you could go inside of there and take the practice exam actually in a computer in a full non-organic environment, right? That is kind of, very sterile and other things. So if you're not used to that, maybe those are some of the things that we can kind of also do in the future as well. Let's see, any questions about the national board? Well, let me go to this one. So this is going to be your practical skills exam. We may change this, especially with their new standard of having self-regulation, as you may see a gray spot be added to this that will have something along the lines of self-regulation. But if you look through here, the main requirements is all of the gray areas. So these are the things that we're looking for when you're getting evaluated. And then we'll learn more about these things whenever we're moving forward. But this is kind of, go ahead.
Are you showing something on the screen?
Yes.
Because there's nothing there.
Can
I
nobody?
don't know if anybody else has one, but all I see is CN.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's black. There's nothing.
It's blank.
Man, well, thank y'all. Let me try to stop sharing and share again.
I'm trying to write as fast as I can.
No, and also I added to the invite the PowerPoints. So I was getting ready to
cool.
where the PowerPoints will be and all that other stuff too. But I guess it won't matter if you can't see what I'm doing. Let's see, did that help?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, y'all can see it now? Okay. Well, now I feel like I got to go back a little bit, but let me read. Haley, did we already answer these questions? Do we need to apply for the final exam right away? I'm intending to take this course for my teaching licensure professional development hours. Would I need to pass the evaluation to have the certificates for hours towards my teaching licensure? And the answer to that is no. You'll get your PD regardless. So if you're here solely just to learn from the PD perspective, that's okay if that's how you want to do it, but you still will go through the exact same process as everybody else. Meaning you'll still get evaluated and all those things because it's part of the course. Did that answer that question, Haley?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, you mentioned that the total course during this Teams as well as outside work is 75 hours. Are we getting credited for 75 hours or just the hours that we are on Teams?
75 hours. You'll get the entire certificate hours for your PD.
And that goes into our PD for our licensure?
Yeah, I'll work with Liz and getting it in the background. And I can't remember the name of that system off the top of my head now, but we'll have it all in there. So once everybody's done with the course, then we will submit that at the end of whenever we send out the final certificates.
And we'll get that irregardless if we've taken the test yet?
Yes, and I'll talk a little bit more because I think with the exam, the course and the exam are two separate things. This is a completely different credential that is outside of District 2 that you would have to sign up for the exam, submit for, and take. It would be completely different than this one.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, for after the course, Haley, to kind of answer that, and Todd may know more about this than I do. You have, I want to say it's 2 years post graduation to take the exam. Don't quote me 100% because they've made a few changes here and there, but I don't think that was a change that they made. And I don't know off the top of my head if it is 100% that, but we'll get that answer for you, Haley.
You got 2 years, but I highly recommend you do it within a year because over the last 5-year period, the board has made some changes to where, like, if they make changes, this course will be grandfathered in, but they may add new stuff to the test that you'd be responsible for on your own.
That's right. So hopefully that answered your question, Haley. You got about 2 years. Just say 2 years. I do highly recommend it. I will say the curriculum that you all are receiving right now, we have a 92% pass rate. Not every program has that. Other programs are roughly at about 50% across the nation. So we focus a lot on passing the exam, and we focus on you leaving this course able to hit the ground running with health and wellness coaching. Okay, yeah, I'm just focusing on license and math. Yeah, I completely understand where I'll tracking this down. Let's see, next person. Go ahead, Mandy.
Where is District 2? Just because I know you're kind of all over, spread out.
Yeah, so District 2 is really, I guess we could say the southern side and maybe, I think, south and southern side of Colorado Springs, but kind of like the north of Fort Carson. Kind of covers like from the airport back to certain areas, but kind of that south side down through there.
Okay, because at first, so kind of like school districts.
Yeah. It's a school district.
Gotcha. All right, I'm on the same page now.
Yeah. No, you're good, Mandy. Thanks. So District 2. Let's see. Did anybody else have a question? Did I miss anything else? Okay. All right. I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but if I miss something, just let me know.
Let me start watching the chat.
So this is the PSA. Like I said, the only thing that you may see different in the future, and of course we'll let you know well ahead of that, is these gray areas are really just competencies that we have to make sure that you hit. And then this section is very important to make sure that you understand the structure of coaching. So these are more like observable skills and qualities that we want every coach to kind of have. But here is actually the structure of what you would actually be doing in coaching, in a coaching session. And that's what we're evaluating you on. And these gray areas are just core competencies that you have to have along the way that are just fundamental pieces that you need in every session. But again, we'll talk more about that and you'll see it because we'll have many that will be a little bit different. All right, it's not letting me stop sharing. I was going to show the National Board Health and Wellness website. If I can. All right, well, maybe we won't.
So just curious, while Charlie's working on that, does anybody know the difference between a well-dressed man on a bicycle and a poorly dressed man on a tricycle? No? Attire.
Attire.
I got smiles.
I got smiles. All right. I have no idea why it's not working right now.
Last Friday, I took my wife to a new restaurant for dinner. It was on the moon. The food was out of this world, but the atmosphere sucked.
Well, I guess nothing is popping up right now. It's driving me crazy. Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Mandy.
Here we go.
I like it too.
All right, everybody. So now I'll start here and then I'll go to the National Board website.
You're starting there. Oh, here it comes. There it is.
Do y'all see it?
Yep, now it was a delayed load.
Yeah, I feel like my internet is going really, really slow for some reason. All right, so everybody that is in the coaching course, minus people outside of District 2, should have access now to the health coaching folder inside of Teams. This is where we're going to be doing all of our work. This is where everything will be submitted. This is where we'll be doing Microsoft Forms to submit homework. It'll all come through Teams. For those folks who don't have access to Teams, what we'll do is I'll just make sure that you all get those folders. We'll use the Google folders or we'll use something a little bit different. And the main reason why we're doing this is to try to find access for bringing in the community into this as we're running this pilot program. So not all of them have access to Canva. Not all of them have access to those areas. I was told by IT that everybody should have access from outside the entity if we give it to them into Teams. So we'll find out. But that is the goal, is I can use Microsoft Forms to send to people and things like that to be able to get people's homework and to submit documents. So that is going to be our goal, but you should have access to this. If you don't, for some reason, send me an email and I'll get you added as soon as possible. For the outside folks, I'm going to be working with IT to try to get you all those things. So if you could send me your email addresses and then I'll try to get you all access to it. But in here, you will see whenever you click on files, we will have administration. And in here, I have several coaching books that will help you pass the exam. I have a resource guide. I have the link to the National Board site. And I also have that PSA. So whenever you see PSA in here, that is what you're going to be used to be evaluated. The whole health inventory, some of you may have already seen that, but that is what we're going to be using to coach people around. But these books are all here to kind of help you pass the exam. We don't have required readings. If I was telling you to focus on one book during this course to prepare you for the exam, I would say the one to focus on would be the Positive Psychology Manual. To me, I think it covers almost everything that you need and covers a little bit of the health and wellness. But these other books are great as well, even the Coactive Coaching, and I can't remember the actual name of this one, but it's another great coaching book. This motivation,
Health and Wellness Scorch.
Yeah,
Mike Jordan.
And this one here is a old version. So that's the reason why it's free and in here. I think they just came out with one, I want to say last year, in the middle of last year or so, a new edition. But honestly, there's not much, just renaming of things and other types of items, or at least what I've noticed in the new one is there's not much in there. I'll click on that, but here's where we'll be submitting our homework, right? So these are going to be the 3 courses that you're going to be doing online and at your own pace. With those courses, whenever you click on them, I'll have the assignments in here. They're not in there yet, but whenever we're coming up on some of those dates, we'll be sending those out and doing things like that in between the courses to try to get you prepared. The scope of practice one will probably be towards the end of this, or I'm sorry, it will be towards the beginning, will be one of the first asynchronous courses that you do. Same thing with strength-based assessments. And then the exam prep will be one of the last ones that you do. And this will be where you submit your videos. Here, whenever you submit your videos, this is where we'll be, giving you the evaluation and providing, feedback on your coaching sessions with your peers. All right, I feel like I've talked a lot about this. Now let me go back and show, well, actually, any questions about teams right now? And again, for those folks who don't have access outside that agency, I'll be working to try to get you all access and are, figuring that process out. All right. And then now let me go back in here. And then whenever you click on the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching website, of course it'll pop up now. You can come in here and you can find all kinds of things in here about the board. I would get in here and get very familiar with the board if you plan on taking the exam. One thing that I'll say, and I know we'll talk about this in the future, is the health and wellness coaching field is one of the fastest growing fields in the nation. They now have reimbursable mechanisms inside of Medicare. Medicaid will also be reimbursable soon, and I think Colorado will be one of the first states to kind of jump on board with that. There are other billing mechanisms, but this is a billable service through Medicare. And I would also say that you can use health savings accounts and other types of things to also bill and collect money for this as well. I don't think there's going to be any slowdown. I know right now people are watching the new administration and some of those cuts and different things that they're going to be looking at doing across the board. I won't say anything's not on the board for them to cut by any means, but this has been one thing that even the Secretary of the VA said that they are still going to be investing in. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't think the momentum's going anywhere. Right now, I want to say we have just over, how many coaches do we have now? Around 12,000 coaches nationwide or globally. So to think about that, this is a fast-growing field, but we're not quite there at state licensures, and those are usually the limitations in doing managed care billing, things like with Medicaid and things like that. That there's usually some type of component at the state level to do, and I think that is the next step that the National Board is looking at. That's a natural next step. So anyway, I say all that. We're going to talk a lot more about reimbursement and those types of things later on, but I just wanted everybody to kind of have that rundown of what the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching is, kind of what this course is going to offer, and kind of what you're going to get whenever you get out of this, is you're going to have the ability to sit for a national board exam that is a billable service and is one of the fastest growing fields in the nation. And there's a lot of government entities right now in the healthcare field that has invested in it, but there's also a lot of private apps or private organizations like BetterUp and places like that that hire coaches. Managed care organizations hire coaches and things like that. So really, I say all that to say, we don't want you leaving D2, so I don't think that's what I'm saying. It's just really, I want you to know the depth of the course that you're in. Does anybody have any questions about any of that kind of before we jump into the presentation side of this? All right, let me see if I missed anything. No, okay. On Teams, when I look, it says it's locked. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
I got it.
The second sentence, yeah. Okay, well, it looks like everything's good. Let me go ahead and jump on in, and then we will share my screen again. If I can find it. All right, now can everybody see my screen?
Oh, sure.
No? Still no? Okay. How about now?
There it is.
There it is. Okay. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking a little bit about cognitive bias and kind of go through those pieces. Talk a little bit about empathy versus sympathy and maybe throw some compassion in there towards the end. And then that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So as we kind of break this down, the first thing that we're going to talk about is really kind of talking a little bit about the neuroscience behind change, right? Is one thing that we have to think about whenever we think about change is that our brains are wired to resist change as a survival mechanism, no matter what, right? So anytime we present change, there is an automatic resistance that our brain puts up. And the main reason why is because we are in a habitual format in our brain. Most of our brain and most of the time, we're roughly running at about anywhere between 50 to 75% of our brain running automatically on habits, which means whenever our brain is running on habits and then all of a sudden we're throwing change in there, then we no longer want to be a part of that. So the big picture here is that it's really difficult to activate and start looking at change, especially when it's so built into our system that it turns into this fight, flight, or freeze mindset of whenever we start to activate our nervous system, and more importantly, our atomic nervous system within our parasympathetic nervous system or sympathetic nervous system. And that process is automatic. So the big picture here is our brain is trying to conserve energy to allow us to be able to react and be able to move through life the way that we can. And whenever we process this new information, a lot of times that there's a habit or a neuro pathway that is in place that we have built that has been strong and reinforced over time by our, I hate to say bad habits, but for instance of getting into health coaching, bad habits, then it's going to be very hard to change that habit. Roughly, the data says it takes anywhere, you can look at different types of data. It says 15 days, it'll say, 30 days. But, one thing that I always think of is it takes 66 days to really form a new habit and break an old habit. And the main reason why is because those neural pathways are so strong. So whenever we're looking and we implement a new program or we implement something different, it takes us 66 days roughly to be able to implement that change. And within that change process, it takes us roughly 7 times to hear that change before we actually understand the change. So think about that as we're working with our clients. If we implement, or if they're trying to implement something, it's going to take them a very long time to implement that. And it's going to take a lot of patience on our side to deal with that. So here we kind of talk a little bit about the nervous system and just understanding that this is an automatic response that activates all of these different pieces, right? And your sympathetic nervous system is your fight, flight, or freeze response, where your parasympathetic nervous system is more of your rest and digest. So whenever we look at this, there's symptoms that we can notice whenever we notice this fight, flight, or freeze response. I won't say it's guaranteed every time, but whenever we look at this, we end up seeing that, accelerated heart rate, right? We start breathing faster. There's so many different things that we can start to see. One story that I always tell here is my dog, our neighbor's dog and our dog fight at the fence all the time. The neighbor's dog is a German Shepherd, and we have this poodle and Brittany Spaniel mix. I forget what they call it, but it's like a Brittany poo. It's a Brittany poo. And, it's a pretty pansy dog, and this German Shepherd wanted to eat it. So we were both walking our trash cans out to the curb, and we both had our dogs with us, and that German Shepherd beelined towards my dog, Chewy. And Chewy ran straight into the house, or not into the house, but into the garage. And whenever he did, the German Shepherd was catching up to him. And whenever he turned a corner, he released all of his bowels. Literally, poop went flying all over our wall, and urine was everywhere, right? And it was very thick urine. I give that example because that is exactly what people do as well, right? Is in the time of crisis, that is something that their body does. And it's automatic. It's nothing they can control. But at the end of the day, if you're scared and you're running for your life and you hear a German Shepherd nipping at your ankles, by all means, you need to run faster. So it is releasing everything in that body to try to get you to run faster. And whenever we're going through change, we need to figure out what the metaphorical piece of that is for people that we're working with and working with them in change, right? Is they may not be releasing their bowels all over the place, but they are experiencing some adverse experiences to the change that you're implementing, and they are activating their sympathetic nervous system on a regular basis whenever that change is occurring on an ongoing basis. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right. Has anybody here ever heard of the window of tolerance? All right. Well, guess what? Y'all are about to learn all about it. So here we are. So the window of tolerance, right? So this is your arousal level, right? And here is a window. Everybody has a window that is their optimal arousal zone. With me saying that, everybody's window is different. So some people's window is wide open, some people's window is not, right? And sometimes it's trauma that causes that, sometimes it's biological factors. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something there. But here you kind of want to stay in this optimal arousal zone that is for you. And the goal is to be here, right? Once we start getting out of this optimal zone, we start to feel uncomfortable. And whenever we start to feel uncomfortable, then there's things that we do like defend and we escape and we avoid, we retaliate because we're outside of our optimal window of tolerance. So whenever we look at this, this is kind of a good example of fluctuation of your window of tolerance throughout the day, right? As you may have some type of flashback, or you might be triggered, there might be some type of transference that happened inside of your classroom, right? So you got to think about that, right? You have this terror feeling, and then you start to eat for comfort, right? Maybe drinking a Mountain Dew because you need a pick-me-up, or whatever it is, right? You're starting to eat maybe go to your bag of sugar that you have, for rewards for your kids in class, or whatever it is, right? You're starting to snack, you're starting to do those things. And then you start to come down here, and then you start to have some negative, defeating self-talk, right? I'm fat and disgusting because I was eating those M&Ms. I just ate all the kids' M&Ms, and now I got to go back to Sam's and get more M&Ms or wherever, and then you start to feel more isolated and those types of things, right? And then you start to get mad because now you're having flashbacks of, in this scenario, just using eating, of maybe your parent calling you a not a good name. And then you start to feel shame, right? And then you start to have this self-directed rage. Alcohol, right? It doesn't have to be all these. And then you start to have these nightmares. But one thing that I'll say within this window of tolerance is whenever you're kind of looking up here, these are things that are kind of, I guess, more anxious, right? So whenever you kind of come up to the top, these are typically more anxiety-provoking things that are happening. Whereas down here, these are probably more depression based items down through here, right? So I think that's important to know, is if you notice that one of your kiddos or a fellow teacher or whoever it is, your loved ones, if you notice that they're starting to feel more depressed, then it's probably that they're depleted down here, right? That they're outside of their window of tolerance, and this is where they're kind of living. And then whenever you think about this up here and anxious, and you start to see those same people start to be more anxious, it's because they're not being regulated inside of their window of tolerance. So that is something to kind of think about as we move forward and understand, because everybody's window of tolerance is a little bit different. So if you think about change in general, right? Change is anxiety provoking, right? We're going to resist that change. And then that's going to lower our window of tolerance whenever we're going through that change. So whenever we're going through a change, we jump up and then we come back down, and we have all this fluctuation, and then we give up. So the ideal scenario is, as coaches, we try to help people or facilitate an environment to where people stay in this optimal range. If they go outside of that optimal range, it's okay, as long as they're kind of coming back in. Now, one thing that I usually, okay.
I was just gonna say, but you know, we got two parallel lines there, but an individual's window of tolerance, you know, that optimal range, that can change for people as they learn healthy coping techniques and different things like that. And that's one of the things, you know, that change induces that narrowing of that optimal, because that's going to push us to one of the two thresholds. But through coaching and that supportive and that other focused listening and the other skills that we'll talk about, we can help somebody maintain their tolerance levels, which from the jump sets them up for success.
Absolutely. You know, that's a great point. Is that is it, right? Is a lot of our skills is helping them also stay in that. And I'll also say, whenever I say helping and facilitate an environment to where they can change, everything Todd was just mentioning is creating that environment so that they can change. And I'll even add to what Todd was saying is that window of tolerance fluctuates day to day, maybe even time to time, right? Of what you're dealing with. And you know, whenever they're in that session with you and you're working with them one-on-one, it's all of those skills that increase it for that session so that window of tolerance can be bigger so that they can tolerate and work through that session. So I think it's very important to kind of understand that the skills that you're going to be learning, like the active listening, reflections, and all that, is to help them have a larger window of tolerance as well inside of that session. But one thing that I always want to add here, because I think this is such a huge topic, is suicide, right? So whenever you look at this, the way to kind of be weary and look at it is whenever people feel so uncomfortable and outside of the norm, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're living up here all the time, right? Because if they're living up here all the time, man, this ain't, I'm just moving so slow. Anyway, if you're above the line, then you are anxious, right? You're not full on suicidal, but if you're down in the depression side, you know, you may be feeling hopeless, but for the most part, you're not suicidal there. Where suicide comes in is whenever people are fluctuating so fast through this entire process that they are going almost like a heartbeat through there, right? That they're going in and out, in and out. They're going up to anxious and down to depression, and it's just constant flow back and forth. Those are the people you should watch out for suicide prevention, or suicide, and then implement suicide prevention methodology at that point. Does anybody have any questions about that piece? Hunger can affect anxiety too, right? Absolutely. Sorry, I missed those, Haley. Sour Patch Kids work wonders with my students, and goldfish, right? Absolutely. You know, but those are great things too. But I would say hunger does. But I'll also add in here, and we'll maybe have a chance to talk about this later in the trauma sections, our slides, is ADHD and trauma and some of the things that we experience with our kids can manifest in the same ways, right? And it's not that we have to be the all know and be all of those things, but we have to kind of be aware of it, right? If a kid is jumping all over the place and different things like that, it could literally be that they have trauma instead of ADHD. And a lot of times you'll notice it whenever you put a kid on a stimulant and then they're all over the place. It does the complete opposite, right? So, you know, sometimes you'll notice it whenever that happens, but sometimes you won't notice it and that kid will get medicated. And what was happening was PTSD and ADHD, one or the other was exacerbating the other. So whether those ADHD symptoms were first and the PTSD was really what was exacerbating those symptoms, that's whenever you notice it. But then a lot of times what happens is they put a kid on an ADHD medication and then out of nowhere the behaviors kind of start to go away a little bit or maybe diminish a little bit, but maybe not fully go away. And then they blame it on the ADHD and not the trauma, right? So it's kind of some of those things that we got to look for, which is important for us to kind of think about. All right, everybody. I'm sorry. This is just being problematic with the internet going so slow. Okay, there we go. All right, so now kind of moving into the trauma side of things. Okay, what was it? So the food helps mitigate that in my experience, absolutely. And the science behind food mitigating those things is not something we would learn as a health coach. You know, one thing that we'll learn whenever we talk about being a health coach is we don't diagnose and we don't prescribe. We don't do any of that. It really takes the pressure away from you, in that we only do things that the client is forming and driving themselves. This is a client-centered approach, and we won't ever do nutritional counseling with anybody or give them nutritional advice or any of those things. And if we do, it's very limited, and there's a methodology in which we will do that we'll learn later. But I do want to kind of make sure that people know that in this coaching course, you do not prescribe and you do not direct care, much like therapy and some of the other professions that are out there. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, on learning some of those science things and different pieces like that. And no need to apologize. All of this is interesting to me. And I don't know if you all know this or not, but we're actually piloting in D2 right now a healthy teaching kitchen at the Family Success Center. So we have, I want to say, about 25 teachers in there right now and staff. And in there, we're teaching them how to cook. We're giving them Instapots, containers to cook, and then they get a week worth of food for that particular week that they're in the course, and it's a 6-week course. So you know, some of those areas we might be able to fill with your bucket with some of those areas as well. So jumping into the trauma side and showing up in your coaching practice. So trauma-informed care aims to help people with meaning and purpose in their lives. And I know we're still not there with that, with understanding the coaching process. But one of the main steps and one of the main things that I think differentiates the coaching field from other helping professions is they actually work with people on defining a mission statement, right? They may call it something different, whatever it is. I tend to always call it a mission statement, but it is that purpose statement that is in your lives, that is something that is always driving you, right? It's kind of that Northern Star type of mission statement. It's your values. It's a combination of everything you are in kind of one sentence, so to speak. Go ahead, Todd.
So I'm going to oversimplify the fancy stuff that Charlie's saying. And, you know, finding meaning and purpose in somebody's lives and what coaching is about, the mission statement, that values. If people did what they were told to, everything would be rainbows and unicorns in this world. People go to the doctor, they tell them you got to eat better, you got to exercise more, you got to stop smoking, you got to do that. And then they leave the doctor's office and they don't do it. So what do we need coaches for? Well, we'll cut. And it pains me to say this because I used to be a drill sergeant, but what coaches do is help somebody find their their reason for change. Because the neuroscience of change tells us that if it's not values driven, if it's not related back to something that's important to us, we're not going to succeed. And that meaning and purpose in somebody's life, you know, you can oversimplify. What's your reason for getting out of bed in the morning? But it's really about people finding their want to.
That's a great addition, is the want to, right? And then aligning the want to the goal, I think would be the next step after that. But I definitely think summing it up to the want to, right? The want to get out of bed, the want to, you know, go step outside to go walking or whatever their goals are, right? The want to, the oomph behind it sometimes.
People get told to do things all the time and they just don't.
That's right. I mean, we know that's a failure, right? We can tell people all day long to do something, but if we don't tap into that intrinsic value and we don't tie it to what is motivating them internal, that gives them that fire or whatever it is, we're failing as coaches.
And I bet you every person in this room has sat across from somebody and said, if you just do what I tell you to do, everything's going to be okay. But they're not gonna. You got to figure out what their want to is.
That's right. And that is where health coaching has their bread and butter for sure. And you know, I'll also say the way that they align goals with action steps to long-term behavioral goals aligned to the mission. There's a little bit more in that. There's a lot of evidence that is coming out right now that says that health coaching is as equivalent to evidence-based psychotherapy. So if there's any therapist in the room, literally health coaching has equivalent outcomes to providing cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, and things like that. I'm sure that, if it was treating trauma specifically, then of course psychotherapy would win all day long. But most people seek therapy because they feel uneasy, right? And not helping goals and not being able to move forward. Coaching is all strength-based and forward momentum, right? It's not about looking at the past. It's not about any of those other things. It is literally, we don't even talk about the past unless it's something that you bring up that's inspiring to you, right? That's the only way we go into the past with our clients in the coaching world. So thinking about that and moving forward, that in itself is a trauma-informed lens, right? Is we're not there to talk about your everything else going on in your life or what it is. We're here to solely focus about what you want to. But back kind of to the trauma-informed language, right? So meaning and purpose fits well within the coaching model. And in my opinion, one of the reasons why it stands out in the field and is one of the fastest growing fields. Fulfill values and roles and engage in life in a community of their choosing, right? And I think we all know that community has such an impact on us. If you have not watched the Netflix, hopefully you have Netflix. If you don't, there's a documentary on Netflix that is about blue zones, and I literally forget the name of it. It may be called Blue Zones, but one of the main themes in his research was community, right? If you didn't have a sense of community, that impacted your longevity and how long you lived, which is wild to think, right? Because we tend to think medications and other things are the things that make us live long, and sometimes forget about that community piece. But our communities is really what helps us out. See themselves more than their trauma, right? So some of the language that we use around that can impact that a lot of times. Help people identify and pursue avenues to reduce distress and problems in their lives. And then exercise personal autonomy, right? I still think a personal autonomy is great, but also personal autonomy isn't always needed, right? Think about the kids that we've worked with in the past. How many kids did we meet along the way that needed more structure than personal autonomy, right? Or vice versa, right? We've met kids that may be in an alternative school but may need more choices. They were literally acting out because they had no choice, right? And then on the other side, we have the kids that may need that structure of an alternative school or maybe not an alternative school, but more structure around all that. It's definitely something that we need to keep in mind as well. But this trauma, right? And having that trauma-informed lens. Here we have the principles of trauma, right? Number one being safety, physical and emotional safety. Here there's so many different ways that we can talk about safety. But really, you need to think about your room safety, right? If you're in a room with somebody, you have to think about that safetiness. I know for you all are working mainly with children, but if you work with an adult, something that you got to think about then is how can you get out of that room as fast as possible if something bad happened, right? So then you got to think about your own safety, right? So safety upon safety. And then the next one is collaboration. And then this collaboration really means that we are asking, right? We're collaborating, we're walking shoulder and shoulder with them as opposed to, it's us dictating the way. And then of course, choice, right? I think we talked a little bit about that on the last slide. Sometimes you want to give them choice, sometimes you don't. But a lot of times, if you're doing something in an instance of like a mindful moment, right? You want to always invite them to do the mindful moment. You don't want to force them to do it, right? And I think that's a good example because in the coaching structure, we're going to be doing a little bit of mindfulness practices to ground people. So whenever we do that, that's something that's within our toolkit. Trustworthiness, right? Strong boundaries and follow through. I think that's usually a hard one for providers, or I think that's the one that people look at us and judge automatically and ding us on is trustworthiness whenever we fail to do something our life happens and even our own burnout and success, right? And kind of hurts that way, or gets hit that way, I guess I should say, not hurts. And then, of course, empowerment, right? Which I think is a buzzword, right? Empower seems to be another big buzzword right now, but it's a great one. But I think whenever we think about empowerment, what does that mean, right? What does it really mean to be empowered? And a lot of times for us as coaches, a lot of times that is empowering people is just sticking to the structure of a coaching session so that they can actually see what it's like to accomplish goals. Because a lot of times people get so frustrated with goals that they throw them out before they even try them because they didn't really take the natural steps to accomplish that goal. So how do you all see trauma showing up in your classrooms as you all start to implement some of these skills across the district or out in the private sector for some of those folks in the community? Yeah, go ahead, Christina.
Well, I'm a school counselor, so I see it firsthand almost every day. But I'll see kids, a teacher will ask a student to like open their computer or just asking them if they're feeling okay, and the student will just seemingly out of nowhere just start blurting out and getting to the point of even just running out of the classroom. It seems like from the teacher's perspective, they're like, I didn't even do anything. I asked them a simple question, but we know for some reason that it's coming from an unsafe feeling, maybe the teacher's voice or, who knows what, but just from past experiences.
It could be a million of those things, right? It could be all the above, but it sounds like especially the running right out of the classroom is that sympathetic nervous system just got activated. So they took off, and probably the kid doesn't even know why they're running out of the classroom sometimes. I won't say all the time, but definitely sometimes that can happen, right? Or here, the defiance and blurting out and shutting down, all those kind of fit in that same model. And as we see it, it's kind of hard to navigate sometimes whenever you have 19 other kids that you got to worry about while this kid's blowing up at the same time. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
We also see a lot of kids have anxiety when it gets close to a break, and we start seeing those responses for not having safe adults in their life for a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, that is another thing that we probably take for granted on the outside looking in that our teachers have to handle, right? Is a portion, and in our district probably a higher portion of our students go home sometimes to no parents slash parents who are working. I don't want to make it sound like they're just out doing nothing, but they could be working their butts off and just not home. I mean, there's so many different scenarios, and maybe sometimes it's other drastic things that are happening in the world that's happening right now, without getting into too much of that. But definitely things that we have to look out for in our district, probably more than other people in other districts, right? Besides maybe D11 or some of these other districts that's south in the Springs. Yeah, those are all great ones, right? As we see it showing up all the time, and we see that parasympathetic nervous system activate in our kids. But sometimes it's just really challenging. Let's see, any other ways that we notice this? I think that is definitely a good one that is overlooked, is building up to those breaks, or even after breaks. It's almost like they're back with their with their safety net, I guess you can say, and then they kind of get that same mindset as well. All right. So trauma-informed care really means shifting the medical question from what's wrong with you, right? That's typically what's going on. Something's wrong with me and I got to go seek medical care, to what's happened to you, right? The trauma-informed mindset is usually what's happened to you, but that's still a defeating mindset, right? Is something happened to them, so it makes it sound like that is who they are, right? Because we want to separate them from that trauma. And then we need to kind of shift it from, maybe we need to understand what happened to you by all means, but then we need to shift it to what matters the most to you. And that's the coaching mindset, and using trauma-informed language is what matters most to you. Because remember, as a coach, you're not going to go and talk to them about maybe the abuse that they experience from their, what was I going to say? Their parents or whatever, right? Something that happened outside of here. That's not your responsibility. But what we can do is we can set up goals. So if they really will have this long-term behavioral goal of 3 to 6 months of sitting, or let's just say 3 months from now, to be implementing mindfulness 5 out of 7 days a week, then that's the goal that they're going to be working on, and it's going to be your goal to facilitate that conversation and get them in that direction. And we're going to teach you those skills. But phrases are words to use, right? Close your eyes. I want you to. If you can't, may bring up feelings of judgment, right? If you can't do this, then do this, right? Just relax. How many people's been told just to relax to only find themselves more infuriated? I know I have myself. So, let's go. Come on, right? I'm sure in the military, if there's any veterans, I know Todd and myself are both veterans, so we use that analogy a lot. Is in the military, it's definitely being told what to do versus the others. Please, that's another one, right? That is kind of out there too, and you should feel. Another one that I'll add to this is, can I help you? Right? One thing that in every place that I've ever worked, we've changed that language, especially in a helping profession, to say something other than, may I help you, right? Because help automatically sounds to people like there's a deficiency, right? You're coming to me because there's something deficient. So you're automatically putting them in that lesser category than them being at the same playing field as you. So taking away that, can I help you, can help meet them where they are, instead of, putting them as tier down below you. And Mandy, that's a good one, right? Just relax, calm down, right? Just calm down, man. Get on with it. Right? I'm sure, I think it was Don or Christine, I can't remember who said it, but whenever those kids are kind of getting frustrated and acting out, I'm sure every time you told them just calm down, it just worked 100% of the time, right? So it's not a good one to use. But I will say, I think for us as coaches, it's not that you're never going to use these words, right? I think it's more that you're going to start bringing it into awareness that you're using these words. And then naturally that will start to calm down a little bit in using those words. But it's just, they're good ones to kind of just keep track of. And I think bringing it into your awareness is good. All right. So supportive phrases. So this one, is really good, right? Feel free to. For today, we're going to do these things. If it is comfortable with you, can we do this, right? Or if it's comfortable with you, we're going to do a mindfulness practice. Or if it's comfortable with you, would you like to eat these, these goldfish, right? Or whatever it is. If and when you're ready, right? Kind of given that invitation side of things. Investigates, explore. One of my favorite words that are on here, that is not on here, is curious. Oh, there it is. Be curious, right? Let's be curious about this process and let's work on this together. You mind, doing X, Y, and Z, right? It just seems better whenever we're kind of like in this exploration mindset. Again, maybe some kids may not like that, but I think overall, most kids are in that boat. All right, let's see. Any questions right now? None. All right. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. So be back at 5:22. All right, as people kind of start to come back, one thing that I kind of forgot to do was introduce myself. And I thought about that afterwards. Um, so now that I've had a break and been able to think about it, we should go ahead and introduce ourselves. Todd, are you on? Looks like we may have lost Todd. Um, but I will go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm Charlie, if you don't know. I know some of you all um, may know me and we may have worked together, or you may be in the yoga course. I've been in the coaching field now for many years. I honestly don't know. It was before 2020 for sure. I want to say, about 2018, I really kind of got into the field and kind of hot and heavy. I've since being in the field, I feel strongly that Todd and myself are some of the leading experts in the coaching field nationwide. Um, and probably my expertise, I won't talk much about his, is more around competency-based education and implementing that, and also programmatic. So that's kind of my background in the coaching field. I've been a national board certified coach since about 2020 and really diving into the field since about 2017. And I like coaching because I'm a mental health therapist by training. And like I mentioned earlier, I like coaching because I don't have to prescribe, right? I don't have to diagnose. Maybe prescribe's the wrong word. I don't prescribe anything, but I definitely diagnose and do those things. And once I got into the coaching field, it took all that pressure away, right? It was like, oh, wait a minute. You mean I don't have to process people's trauma to be a health coach? I can move forward. Oh man, I can be strength based. I don't have to, use talk therapy to make them feel beat down a little bit, and it felt good. So that's the reason why I love the coaching field and think it's, probably one of the future fields in the coaching department or in the world of healthcare. All right. Well, for time's sake, I'm probably just going to go down the list of people. If you could introduce yourself, say the school that you work at. If you don't work here, maybe say the agency that you work at. And then lastly, kind of say why you want to be in the coaching field. And if you can't talk for any reason, please put those things kind of in the chat too. But I'm going to go ahead and go down the list. So let's see. Let's go, Christina. All right, and we'll just keep going down. Let's see, Deborah. Deborah, making sure I'm saying that name right. Also, if I'm mispronouncing your names, please correct me as you introduce yourself.
Thank you for self-correcting that, but it is Deborah.
Okay.
I'm a special education teacher at Mountain Vista Community School in District 2. I actually didn't know what this course was about. I just thought it was a simple health course. So it's a little more deep than I thought it was going to be, but I love teaching, but better than that, I love coaching. I love helping people to help them to make those decisions. Even with teaching the students, I don't teach, I help them to learn. I don't teach them. And there's kind of a difference between that, because you give them that freedom to make choices, good or bad, and understand consequences behind it. So, but I love teaching, and I definitely love coaching. So I'm kind of curious where this is going to take me, honestly. That's why I kind of had some anxiety when you said 75 hours. I go, oh my God, what did I get into? But I'm kind of curious and interested, and hoping to get a lot out of this that will help me in my classroom environment, with the students who face trauma, with family members, with myself, with the community, and even with the people that I work with. So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah, for adding that, and definitely hear the compassion. Right, I know that probably everybody probably here for a reason, right? Or at least at the school district. I mean, not necessarily in this course, but definitely that piece. Right? So thank you for that. All right. Let's see. Next would be Jamie. All right, Jamie, are you there? We can come back. Let's go to Hope. Uh-oh,
Sorry,
Hope.
Charles.
Yeah, go
Jamie
ahead.
and I both responded in the chat because my cat is kind of freaking out. I just stepped out of the room for a second so I could say that.
Good. Thank you for saying that. I wasn't looking at the chat at the same time. So thank you.
Yep. Jamie and I both talked in the chat.
Got it. Got it. I'll go back to the chat at the end. Sorry, Hope. Go ahead. Or maybe not. You might have to put it in the chat too, because we can't hear you.
It looks like another member, Ruth, is also posted in the chat, so you might want to start reading them off. There's 3 now.
Okay. Thank you. No. No, she dropped. We'll move on. All right. Let's go, Mandy.
Yeah, Teams hasn't been very cooperative tonight for me
Really
either.
not, is it?
Okay, sorry. I have too many mice going and like I grabbed the wrong one and I was like navigating works Teams instead of this Teams and I was going, So my name is Mandy Mark. I am actually a peer support specialist with Rocky Mountain Human Services and work primarily at the state hospitals. So I've had a couple of trainings with Charlie and Todd in the past. And so when this one came offered, I was like, oh, can I please tag along? So I really appreciate you letting me do that and letting me sit in and join. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mandy. So as I said at the beginning, if you're not familiar with Rocky Mountain Human Services, for a better choice of words, they're kind of a community health program that does a variety of different programs, from substance abuse to peer support, but definitely serves within our community, and one of the reasons why Mandy is here. So thank you, Mandy, for that, and being a part of this and being a part of us fumbling through it too. So thank you. All right, let me go to the chat and make sure I'm not missing it, because I think Hope was next. So let me just read. Let me go all the way up to Haley's. I'll go to Haley first. So she teaches special needs at Harrison High School. I am not in the yoga class, but I am in the cooking class. And that was previously mentioned. I love it, and it's a great program. If you are interested in our coaching program, or not coaching program, cooking program, just let me know that too. We can put you on a waiting list, but we are going to teach it again in 6 weeks. Maybe not 6 exact weeks, but we're going to have 2 cohorts this semester. Let's see. Next is Jamie. So I am a health tech for Harrison School District at Monterey. I value mental health, and that is why I chose this course. I love helping our students, and I hope I can learn skills for them and our children as well. Absolutely. And Jamie, one thing that I have a vision of is every single health tech at District 2 should be a certified health coach in the future, or at least able to, just because 1, I think it could help our students, but 2, I think it can help bring income into our district, meaning we could build Medicare or Medicaid, because we have a Medicaid coordinator at the district, right? We could actually build these type of services in the future to be able to do that and make programs more sustainable. And no need to apologize. We're all here. So Teams is jacking everybody up tonight. So, and then let's see, Ruth. She is a counselor at Fox Meadow Middle School. She does have a clinical license. I am excited about coaching because, like you, I don't like diagnosing, right? right? It's too much liability and labeling. I just don't like it. So just looking forward to what I can learn and help move people forward and thrive. Perfect. And then Hope, she is a first grade teacher at Sand Creek International. I've always been interested in health related fields, and my undergraduate background is in psychology. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to deep dive. Absolutely, it will, for sure. For sure. So thank you all for putting that in. So let's go back. So let's see. Let's go to Catherine.
All right, that is not my picture. All right. So my name is Kate McKinnon. I work in the district. I work for Career Readiness Academy. That's the alternative program here in District 2. So I do day school, and then I'm actually at night, still at school. We have a night school program for students who are trying to do credit recovery and graduate as well before they turn 21. So that's my nighttime. So I have a bachelor's in health, and then my teaching certificate. But then my master's is in community care and counseling with emphasis in trauma, as well as my doctorate that I'm working on finishing. So this kind of just went along with it. And when it popped up, I was absolutely interested and signed up right away.
I'm glad you're here. It sounds like a lot of people have a lot of overlap, but definitely sounds like you do. So let me get that right. It's not Catherine, it's Kate. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. So Kate.
And that's my little doggy there. That's my picture. So.
Dog. Oh. I feel like we're eventually going to have to share pictures of everybody. That's what's going to have to happen for sure. Forget the kids. We want animals. Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome.
Let's see. Don.
Hi, everyone. I'm the counselor over at Centennial Elementary School. And I believe if you're going to have healthy students, you have to have healthy adults. So I'm looking forward to learning some more things for both sets of people in my building.
That's right. You know, you hit the nail on the head, right? Is really you can see that there's a lot more staff in here than there was students. And the goal was to focus on staff first, right? And that's kind of been the mindset is if we get our teachers and staff, if we eliminate some of the basic needs, right? If they don't have to worry about financial planning, if we can teach them how to meal prep on a budget, if we can do the things that eliminate it, right? You can show up and teach all day long. Why do you need the same PDs over and over again? Or, whatever it is, that makes it sound bad because I do believe that we try our best with PDs. And I know that makes it sound real bad, but, but for real, like how can we now do things that are different? Like the healthy teaching class this summer, one thing that we're looking to do is potentially bring on financial advisors and have a financial advisor PD, right? So starting to look at more things along those lines, which if you think about it as we go through this health coaching course, keep that in mind because ultimately I'm implementing a health coaching model across the district that focuses on those domains of self-care once we get there. And the goal would be to have those domains of self-care met for all of our teachers. Let's see, Josephine. Oh no, we can't hear you.
Muted.
Yeah, you're muted. Oh no, we still can't hear you. Yeah. We'll let her work that out, and then we'll keep going. So next is Calvin.
So I'm Calvin Roush. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
All right, perfect. So I can also kind of speak for Josephine. We both work at Aspire, so we work through the district's online school. I've always been really big into like weightlifting and gym etiquette and all that stuff, and just trying to live a healthy lifestyle and inspire my students to do the same. So when this kind of was offered, I felt like it was a great next step for me to progress in that. So yeah.
Absolutely. And Calvin, I know me and you kind of exchanged some emails about the course. Another thing that I would like to see this course evolve into would be to incorporate multiple different certifications as well that we can incorporate into this. Like there's multiple other organizations that overlap with this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, and other credentials to pursue in this field. Let's see.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Our goal is to make this really, hopefully, a very great program. And you know, the other idea behind all of these courses too isn't just health and wellness, but I notice, right, as a lot of our teachers have secondary jobs, and a lot of times those secondary jobs are not fulfilling. Or let me say, maybe not fulfilling is not the right word. That's probably a bad way to say it. It is not in line with their purpose statement, right, or their purpose or their mission. It's not like being a teacher, right? They're out being a barista or working at Walmart or whatever it is, and it's just really paying the bills more than it is fulfilling, right? And now I'm hopeful that we can create some certificates and other things to where now these teachers can take a second job at our district. The folks that are working in our district can now take jobs outside that's a little bit more fulfilling, that's also part-time or maybe over the summer or you know whatever it is. So also keep that in mind as we move forward with coming up with new training modules and things like that, as that's really also part of the goal too. So thanks. Let's see, next will be Kelly.
Hey everybody, I am Kelly Sisson. I work at the district office at Harrison District 2, kind of in a similar role to Charlie, except I oversee student wellness, whereas he's on the staff wellness side. I've been with the district for a long time. I taught high school health, and now I'm working in student health and wellness. So I've always kind of been in that field. It's what I'm passionate about. I love helping other people. So when I saw this opportunity, it just seemed like a perfect next step to actually get, you know, a certification in that area that I'm already working. So glad to be here, glad for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And absolutely, Kelly definitely helps keep me online sometimes because I forget a lot of things and have no idea what I'm doing. And then Kelly's like, oh, you're supposed to be doing these committees and these things. And I'm like, oh, snap. Okay, yeah, you're right. I got to go do those things. So
But you know what, Charlie, what you're doing now is way beyond what you were expected to do. So it's super awesome and we're super appreciative. So crushing it.
I won't get fired. That's what I'm on. All right. Thanks, Kelly. And then next, Olivia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm Olivia. I am a PE teacher at Harrison High School. So I feel like this is already within my field as well. But I'm interested in learning just more about the mental health side of things and how I can help my students cope with things and myself even and other people in my life. Um, and you kind of talked about side jobs. I think this would be also an amazing side job to have as well. So. Yeah.
I agree 100%, right? That's again that's not why we're doing it, but that is one of the main reasons why we're doing it for sure, is to help people get these side jobs. All right, let's see now. I think Todd, you're the last one. Did I miss anybody else? Or Danielle, sorry. Yeah, I forgot about Danielle. How could I forget about Danielle? Go ahead.
How can you forget about Danielle?
That's right.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I work at Sand Creek International along with Hope down there. It's so good to see people that you know, in this class. I'm also in your yoga certification class and enjoying that really good. I actually thought that's what I was doing tonight, but because I have so many appointments, I got the wrong one, but that's okay. But before I taught, I worked in child protective services for quite many years and saw a lot of the, trauma and things that were going on with kids. And that's kind of why I became a teacher, because I was on the opposite side of being able to help the students become independent and go out into life, because you're a child for so long, but then you grow up, and I really want to be a part of that for them, that ability to give them a positive outlook, to help them, find out what their goal is, where they're going in life, and I do that with my kiddos. I work with the TAP team, so I'm the autism program teacher, and you see it with these kids when we're teaching these life skills. There's also those other skills about being able to have self-awareness,
That's right.
which is really good. So that's why I'm doing it. I'm really excited. I'm glad to be here too with all of you. And I'm glad to see some faces. Kate, I remember Kate and I went to school together.
Oh,
And
that's
Kelly,
awesome.
I worked with you in wellness. So this is, I mean, like I said, this is really cool to see faces that I already know.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I jump to Todd, and actually I forgot Blake too. So let's do Christina.
Yeah, I'm a school counselor. I'm also in the yoga class. And additionally, I'm doing the neurosequential model of education with Jamie DeSmit and Dr. Bruce Perry and all that. And Ruth Akal is in both of those with me. So um, both of us are just totally immersing ourselves in this whole world of trauma informed and how the physical body affects the mental body. And I do think maybe someday I would like to do this as a side gig. That sounds very exciting for me. So I am looking to the future, just like Danielle. But at the same time, I really want to be able to help my students now when they come to me and to give them more tools for their toolbox to be able to help them work through everything that they are working through and just all the different techniques and maybe just a different way of doing it, like instead of the box breathing, like what other options do they have for that, and how does all of this tie in to each other? I'm a connector, and I like the way that all of these ideas and theories and everything are pulling together.
That is. And you know that neuro-linguistic model, or the one that you're doing with Jamie in mental health, you know, I think that is going to complement everything that we're doing very well. So I think that's a great curriculum as well. For those, I think you said Ruth was the other one in there. You know, that's going to complement things. So I may ask you and Ruth a lot of questions at the end of both courses. um,
Yeah, it's a lot of work. All of it is a lot of work, but it's good work.
yeah, I bet. Um, and well, I was going to add something else about that, but that's okay. If I think about it, I'll come back. I was going to, so Blake put it in here. He became or is aware of the course through college colleagues, and after studying biology and doing personal training, you know, he's decided to kind of get into this and continue down this path and getting a teaching degree. So there we go. We might have a future teacher for District 2 right there. Um, let's see now, Todd.
Yeah, I hear people talking about their side gigs and, you know, something that gives you purpose. This is my side gig, and I have a lot of passion for health coaching. Like Charlie, I am a board certified coach. And I think when I got my certification back in 2019, there were just under 3,000 certified coaches. So that just, Charlie said it's a growing field, you know, in 6 years. Now we're up to 12,000. It shows what it's growing. I got a day job. I work for the VA as a whole health program manager, supervising coaches. I've been with the VA for just about 7 years, and four and a half of that I've been supervising coaches. And you know, one of the things that I'm passionate about, Charlie's about the big programs and stuff. I'm passionate about the future coaching and professionalization of coaching and getting at that level playing field. You know, our results are meeting those of some mental health providers and things like that. And that being said, I'm a big believer that passing the exam don't make you a good coach, but we train good coaches in this course. That's why we have a 92% pass rate. So, and with that, you know, and everything else, it's also about supporting each other, you know, as we're coaching, you know, whether you go do this as a full-time gig or a part-time gig, you know, getting those colleagues and that mentoring and everything that we need as a community to grow and support each other and continue to move coaching forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, Todd. And you know, something else for Todd is he's also volunteering his time here tonight and for this course doing evaluations and things like that. So, you know, if you ever want to reach out to him and say thank you, definitely do that. As you're kind of meeting with them, because everybody here may meet well, maybe not everybody, but people will probably be one-on-one with Todd at certain times and things like that. So,
I'm a delight. You'll enjoy it.
I was going to use another word, but we'll move on. So, oh, this was going to be the other thing that I was going to say. I started in foster care and adoption services as well, and worked in community mental health. So back to kind of Danielle's point, that's what made me think about it. And one thing that I noticed in that is whenever there was always a broken system between the state and the education system. And it was always like this tug of war of who had either power or who had the rights to the information. And in reality, it was the kid who was kind of stuck there, and the family who was stuck there kind of looking at both sides, like where are we going and where we're heading. And that's what I noticed. It may not be everywhere, but I feel like, it's hopefully getting better, but I still feel like it's very much the same way of everybody kind of like that Spider-Man meme pointing at everybody else, and then nobody taking full responsibility. Or I shouldn't say responsibility, or getting the job done is probably a better way to say it. And nobody's coordinating that care from that perspective, I guess, is a better way to say it.
Right, not for the child.
Not for the child, that's right.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of times what happens in that department, child protective, is whoever gets to have the child, whether it's foster or kinship, wherever they live, they move that child from one school to another school to another school to another school. And the gaps are crazy. It impacts all of that for them. And it's really, really hard for them.
Absolutely.
Even with the McGinney-Vento, because then you just travel on a bus 2 hours one way and 2 hours back. So it's a broken system. I agree.
Yeah, and again, it's the kids who are really suffering. Well, nobody knows what to do. And again, I don't know what the right systems are. I came from Tennessee, where I worked in that system, and they're one of the leaders in the nation in those types of efforts, or at least foster care. I wouldn't say all of those systems, right? And they were still way behind the power curve. So still a lot to learn in those systems and tracking it down and all that. So, I feel like anybody that does that work has my blessings, but I feel like it's much better on this side of that work than it is on that side of that work. So anyway, well, thank you all for those introductions. It might take me a while to remember everybody's names and all those types of things, but definitely correct me if I mess it up, and then we'll keep going, because I definitely want to make sure I'm getting your names right. And thank you all. And, much like Todd said, I'm hearing a lot of compassion here. I'm hearing a lot of people who want to be here and want to learn. And we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. All right, so now let's jump into cognitive bias. Whenever you all hear the word cognitive bias, what comes to mind?
For me, what comes to my mind would be different levels of knowledge, like levels of ability, knowledge.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I definitely agree with the layers, right? Because even whenever we look at this slide, it kind of starts to dive into those different layers, right? We have the conscious bias, right? Which are some of the things that we know and we sense it. We might have biases towards it. We all have different biases, right? That's kind of what we're getting at. We need to bring those biases into awareness. But it's hard to bring those biases into awareness whenever it's everything that's under the iceberg, right? It's our past trauma. It is the way somebody talked to us in our first job. It is everything that we've built up to and have those thoughts and feelings in the back of our mind. And I think it's very important for us to kind of start bringing that type of stuff into awareness. Because we live in a time to where bias and these types of things are brought up to the forefront and then pushed back down, right? We're kind of seeing a roller coaster, so to speak, of diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do we really talk about these unconscious biases and do those types of things, and then integrate an action plan to help us overcome those unconscious biases so that they don't impact our clients, our students, or anybody that we're talking with. So addressing cognitive or conscious biases, right? First, we have to be aware, and we have to be able to bring this into awareness. And it's extremely difficult to bring this into awareness just because, again, we don't even know, right? And so many different things bleed into this. And one thing, talking about military, is I always remember the first time I went to boot camp, right? If there are, I know Todd was a veteran, but any other veterans, right? Most people remember that. And whenever I went to boot camp, for the first time ever, I heard a Boston accent, right? Like I had never heard a Northern accent until I joined the Marine Corps, right? And whenever I heard him, I just thought he was some arrogant a-hole, is what I thought, right? And that was my cognitive bias, was that's what I heard on TV growing up, probably, right? And then that's what my cognitive bias was, even though it had nothing to do with that individual in front of me. So we have to always kind of remember that those are some things that may not have been that harmful in that particular moment, but can be harmful when we're working with people, right? Is language matters, words matter, and our unconscious bias matters, right? Park the car in the Harvard yard. That's right. That's right. I heard that, and it just threw me off, right? So I think it's little things like that that we don't even know that we have a bias about until we hear it, and sometimes it's that we never even heard it before. So now we're now having this reaction to it in the back of our minds, and it's hard to navigate all those different pieces. And then really, I think finding ways to explore conscious biases as well. I think it's very hard to talk about cognitive and conscious biases with colleagues because we're afraid to have the difficult conversations of what we're truly biased about. And that is probably our biggest limitation whenever it comes to bringing awareness of biases into the world, right? Is we don't want to admit sometimes that we may have biases towards a certain person, people, reasons, right? The Boston accent, right? Or whatever it is. We don't want to have those open conversations because they're difficult conversations a lot of times. And who knows if that's perceived difficult or real difficult or not, right? Let's see, explore the experiences of others, right? And try to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about empathy and sympathy here in a minute, but that's really kind of getting at that piece. But again, this last one is work with a trusted mentor. Find somebody that you can talk to about some of these difficult conversations, right? Or these difficult topics. Explore your biases. There's all kinds of studies out there, or tools that you can literally look up to say, recognizing my unconscious bias or whatever it is. And then it'll be tools that you'll look at, and then you have to make judgments with your hand while looking at a picture. And it'll tell you exactly where you're biased. I think that process isn't the most evidenced way to do it, but it's a good way to start bringing it into awareness, because some of those questions, can trigger some good conversations. So types of unconscious biases is race, right? Gender and sex, ageism. There's also, one thing that I talk about here too is kind of sometimes the microaggressive biases that come out. And one that I always talk about with sex and gender is, women can't drive, right? That's usually always a cultural thing that is said on TV and TV shows. But that's also a bias, right? That's not accurate that all women can't drive, right? And to say a comment like that could be microaggressive as well. So I think that is also something to remember, that a lot of times jokes are microaggressive types of behavior. And Todd put in the chat, biases are not always negative, or judgment can be off because we have positive biases as well. And absolutely, the positive biases help guide us too, right? We're talking a lot about negative because we need to bring the negative into awareness, but it's also good to bring those positive ones that Todd's kind of alluding to as well, that are, are more positive things that can help people move forward. One that is on here is name. Whenever people see a name, that can be biased, right? I think we all, maybe everybody here knows this, but research definitely shows that your name can determine the job that you get, or if you're, maybe not the job, whether you get an interview or not. I forget what the numbers are, but it's crazy how the numbers really are, that if you have more of a common mainstream name like Charles or Charlie, that you're more likely to get a job than somebody that doesn't have one of those mainstream common cultural names. So So that's definitely important. Sexuality, right, is another one. Here, I usually tell a story too. Whenever I first started at the VA, like I mentioned, I had worked in child and foster care services, and I left that job and went to the VA. I was trained in EMDR, one of the only providers at the time that was trained in EMDR. If you're not familiar with it, it's a non-talk therapy version of trauma therapy, is the best way I can kind of say it. And it's a very good therapy. So a lot of times whenever people fail certain therapies, and I say fail in quotation marks, then they would send them to EMDR at the time because there wasn't too many people trained in it. And one person that got referred to me was from the LGBTQ coordinator for the VA, and this was a transgender client, male to female. And I had never, ever worked with a transgender client. I had worked in the LGBTQ community, but I had never worked with a transgender client, or at least they were younger. So, I had never done this. So I was scared out of my mind, right? I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew I was going to fumble this. I knew I was going to mess it up. And I'm just thinking in the back of my head, like, oh man, what am I going to do? But these are all biases, right? I sought supervision and did all these things. And then whenever it came time to actually talk with the client, I just really sat down and said, I want you to know that I am going to fumble and I am going to mess this up. This is the first time that I have ever worked with anybody in the trans community. And I want you to know that if I do say something that is off-putting or that is just completely, that you feel is discriminatory, I want you to know that that's coming from a place of ignorance and not a place of hate. So hopefully you can tell me that and we can have a conversation about those areas, right? And we ended up having a great relationship. She stayed in therapy with me, and I ended up getting a lot more transgender clients referred to me because, I showed compassion in that moment to one person. And I don't know if anybody's ever kind of heard this, that sometimes it takes one good experience to get another referral, like if you ever in private practice or whatever, but it can take one bad experience to where you lose 10 referrals, right? So, the return on investment is not very high, but the return on investment for doing the opposite is extremely low, right? You are going to ruin your career by not showing this compassion and not kind of being there, and also just kind of being genuine in the moment, right? As I let her know, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here, right? And I'm sorry, but here is what we're going to do to move forward. I can do the EMDR, and you educate me on some of the transgender community issues that I may be messing up in therapy. So it turned into a good collaborative relationship. So think about that, right? That is ways that we can mitigate some of these biases that we have whenever we notice it. And I would say that is a key indicator that would be that is whenever you get a new client or you read a referral and you immediately have some physiological or mental type of reaction that is almost panic mode, right? That's probably a key indicator that you might have some bias in this area and you might need to spend some time kind of exploring it. Is it bias that I may be ill-equipped to handle this scenario? Is it a bias that, I have no idea who this person is in front of me and I've never worked with this, right? And I know that I will mess up gender neutral words. I know I'm going to call, the biggest thing that we talked about would be things like, for me, is in my own house, I'm in a house full of women and I still call everybody a dude, right? I'm always like, dude, right? Things like that, right? But those are the things that came out. And I think it's powerful, right? To be able to have those conversations with people, because whether you believe in these things or not, right? Because we're in a time to where a lot of this is being scrutinized. And all of that aside, right, is you as a health coach there should be no reason why you would never coach somebody that came in there. And that's a good example that is transgender, because you have no issues on going back in the past, right? That's not what you're doing. You're not talking about that. You're not talking about their gender dysphoria. You're not talking about any of those things. You're just trying to move them forward into the health goals that they want to accomplish. So in any of these that we talk about in broad strokes, right, is these biases. I will also say another bias that I have is people who maintain the status quo in organizations, right? One thing that I will always have a bias that will always be in the back of my head is if we're implementing change in an organization and I hear somebody say, well, we just can't do that. or we've never really historically done that, so why don't we look at doing something else, right? That is all fear-based mindsets right there. So that's always in my head, like, oh, okay, you don't like change, right? That's my first thing, and it may not be that, right? It may be that they've been down this path before and don't want to go down this path again. So anyway, so here goes some of the things to just kind of look out for. But this is always what I feel like people need to remember, right? Is your background plus your life experiences equals your story. And if we were to add on top of that, that also equals your biases, right? Here is how you formulate your biases, and then your story informs your biases. So those are ideas, or these are things to kind of keep in mind is, how did that event shape your values, right? If you were in the military, right, talking about positive biases, my experience in the military, although adverse, was very positive and pushed me into the right direction. That helped shape my story. And those are biases that I will always have. But those will always be a part of who I am and always will help shape my worldview. But these are the things that we have to think of is how do events and how does our background shape that worldview? What did we lack? Did we never meet anybody that had a Boston accent, right? Or a Northern accent? It's those types of things that we have to explore and find out. And then whenever we're met with something that is new, it's about approaching it with curiosity and then aligning it to your values, right? And I mean that as yourself looking at biases is you may not be 100% biased towards people that have a Boston accent. I'm sorry if anybody here is from Boston. I'm just using that because I feel like that's one of the least offensive ways I could hopefully get the point across is I have no issues with somebody that is from Boston and their accent is just something I never heard. So I can literally work with them and it's going to be something that I'm going to get used to over time, right? And I think that's one thing that we can look at because my value in this scenario is that I don't want to have this person be hurt in any way because of words that I use, right? And that's my value is I want to be able to treat everybody as equals in front of me. What affects our stories, right, is, here we can actually maybe, if you all are willing to unmute or type in the chat box to answer some of these questions, but, what are some examples of characteristics that shape our story?
I'll go ahead and share something, Charlie.
Yeah, go ahead.
And when we talk about examples that shape our story and everything, and I'm going to use a personal example for me, and it doesn't, I come out okay in the end, but it doesn't paint me in the most favorable light early on. But I did 24 years in the Army and I was medically retired. And during that time, I spent time as a drill sergeant. One of the very first clients that I saw at the VA was a young woman. I don't even think she was 22 years old. And she actually never made it through basic training because and I'm going to talk like I thought then because she couldn't hack it. As a drill sergeant, part of my job was getting rid of people that couldn't hack it, couldn't make the standards of the service. And here she is sitting in front of me laying out all this stuff. And because of my experience that shaped my story, that was my job. That's what I was supposed to do. I was doing right. I was performing that mission. I could not see her as who she was sitting in front of me. I saw her as somebody that couldn't hack it, that didn't make it. She didn't deserve this. She didn't do all the things that everybody else did. And that's an event that shaped my story. And but I share that and everything else because at the time, I was not there, and Charlie said we should be able to coach anybody, and I 100% agree with him. I got that person to a different coach. After that session, I had someone else follow up with them because I just wasn't in a place to do that. But by bringing awareness to our biases, we can grow. I mean, I'm not going to say that if I sit down with someone and they have a similar story that some of that stuff doesn't pop into my head, but I didn't really understand it at the time, but now I understand it and I'm able to manage it. I'm still able to be there for that person and meet somebody where they're at.
Yeah, that's a great one, Todd. And I'll add to, I only say that for the sake of this conversation. We're going to do another presentation at some point on when and how to refer, and we'll talk about that. If you can't overcome these biases, or if you feel like you can't be a good coach to them, or someone else could be, and I'll give an example of myself. If I couldn't have been a good person to that transgender client that came in, I should have said either no, that I would not take them, or I should have referred them to somebody else, right? And I think that's a good example too, is if I felt like I wasn't going to be able to meet that person. Now, I'll say in that scenario, I did not have an option. I had to take the person. So sometimes you'll be in scenarios like that to where you won't really have an option. But if you do have an option, then sometimes that's always good to always build your bench. And we'll talk more about that too, is to have colleagues potentially of different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, genders, everything, right? So then that way, if it is a transgender client, they would be more comfortable not working with me, but maybe a female, then I would be able to have somebody on my bench to be able to refer them to.
And I'd even go take it a step further, is maybe it's not somebody that you necessarily refer them to, but you're able to consult.
Yeah.
And explore some of your own biases, get a different perspective, and go back and better allow you to meet that client where they're at.
Absolutely, right. As that's the end goal, is to get us comfortable to work with as many people as possible, because that's our goal, is to help as many people as possible, right? Let's see. So what some people said. So Kate said how we grew up. Absolutely, right. Is the way that we grew up, right? If you grew up in foster care, if you grew up in the justice system, if you grew up with parents who were constantly in domestic violence type situations, those are definitely things that are going to help us. But even from a fundamental piece, going to church every Sunday, or whether you didn't, right? Did you read every night? Different books, right? Those are all some of those things on the way that we grew up that can help us create our biases. Our family most certainly can, right? Our families is where we strive to find ourselves, right? Is within our families a lot of times. And I'll say family means so many different things to so many different people. Here in Colorado, we have no family out here, so our family is really friends, right? So people who are on our daughter's emergency pickup list is not family, right? They're friends out here. I mean, they're family for the way that we kind of talk about them and things like that. But definitely single versus both parents at home. Absolutely. There's so much research that shows, the single versus both parents at home, right? And those different areas, whether a stepdad is in there or not, right? Those are also another piece, our step parent. And then how others treat you and respond to you. Absolutely. If you feel heard, you're going to feel more empowered in life, right? If you've never been heard, you might be having your shoulders kind of collapsing in and not talking as much. Negative relationships, absolutely. That kind of goes back to even domestic violence, but not even as bad as domestic violence. It could literally be negative relationships of somebody who just depletes all of your energy all the time, and you get no rewards back from them, right? If it's just a depleter, is kind of what I talk about with other people, then that's very challenging. Feeling or not feeling a sense of belonging to your family or peer group. Absolutely, right? We know that being a part of community is 100% that helps us live longer. One thing that I'll add, though, I talked about that documentary. One thing that they talked about in that documentary was a group in, I think it was Greece, might have been Italy, but somewhere in that area, that region. And they drank wine every single night, but they still had a longer longevity than anywhere else in the nation, right? They had more people that lived to be 100 in that community than anywhere else, which I think is powerful, right? That you can still drink wine every night, but that sense of community outweighed, that wine that was going into their body and other things, right? They were walking everywhere, just different things. So I think that's important to know. I grew up in a rural area on a farm, and after high school moved into the city limits. That was a shock. That was almost probably the same scenario of me going into the Marine Corps and then hearing my first, Boston accent in real life. But it's a culture shock. A lot of people don't realize how much of a shock these things can be. Growing up with 5 generations, right? Having 5 generations in one home, that is, a lot. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. It's a lot of conflicting values, even, right? If you think about it, right? Because each generation has their own values that are kind of stuck with them. And I think we're seeing that even in today's political landscapes and different things, right? It's kind of like fighting over those things. Relationships with parents and authority figures, value, religion, culture, yeah, all the above. Education, social class, I think that's the first time someone mentioned that, right? Is your social class definitely has an impact on your story. Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zone. That's it. There it is. There's the documentary. Thanks, Kelly, for adding that, since I keep referring to it. It's a great documentary. If you have Netflix, I highly recommend it. So anyway, so these are the things that impacts our story, and definitely are things that we should start bringing into awareness, whether it's journaling, whether it's meditation practices. I highly recommend you have an internal process to kind of self-evaluate on a regular basis, whatever that is to you. But it's important that we do those things because it helps us be able to move forward. So self-awareness in action, right? Can we check our biases at the door? How many people feel that we can check our biases at the door? Yeah. Yeah. How do you think we can go about doing something like that? Depends on the situations. Yeah, I agree with that, Kate. I think there's definitely situations you might not be able to. Well, I'll throw one out there that and you'll learn in our coaching sessions, is one thing that we start every single session with is a mindful awareness moment. So whenever you do that, minute-ish type of mindful moment, that's not just for the client, right? That is for you to kind of regulate there for a minute. You just happen to have another person there while you're doing it. That is, in my opinion, one way. Yeah, Ruth, definitely starting that self-awareness, right? Tracking like, oh man, for the past 2 sessions, I had somebody that had a Boston accent, and for some reason I was having this, physiological reaction. And then, then I can explore my past and explore myself and realize that it was just, that first military experience that's coming out. I literally if somebody is from Boston, I literally have no bias towards Boston. Yeah, that's just a good example. But I definitely. Go ahead.
Another huge thing for checking the biases at their doors, remember why you're there as a coach, because biases are about us and how we feel and what we think. And we're there for the client. It's client centric. And that's just a little rule that I have. I'm there for them, not the judge.
That's right, not the judge. And one thing that I always tell people too is, if you were in my office at my home, because I'm at home right now, not at work, but I literally have my purpose statement written up here along with believe, right? From Ted Lasso, if anybody's familiar with Ted Lasso, but I got his believe thing right up here. Because, those are the things that I have to remember. And to Todd's point, before I see or talk to anybody, I reread those things on a regular basis. Whenever I worked at the hospital, one thing that we tried to get doctors to do was we did 2 things. We put a dot above their computers, and then the other thing was the hand sanitizer. They always had to walk into a room and do hand sanitizer. So why were they not taking a mindful moment in that moment before they walk in, right? So it's even using things that are organic in your day that can kind of give you that pause, right? Instead of going in, because remember, if you don't take that pause, most of your actions are automatic, which means you're going to be leaning on your story regardless going into that session. So if you're not bringing these things into awareness, those biases are going to come out regardless. So it's very important for us to kind of keep those pieces in mind. I feel like we talked about a lot of these, right? Is how do we not bring it in there? I think one thing that we hadn't mentioned right now is in the back of your head, a lot of times, especially being new coaches, you're going to be self-talking a lot, right? You're going to be in the back of your head saying, man, I really need to reflect what this client's saying. I need to start absorb. Am I really listening to this person? And you're going to have this internal dialogue that is going off in the back of your head. I think it's important to understand that, because a lot of times those mindful moments are going to help bring you back to those moments. And of course, once you get confidence, a lot of that self-talk goes away naturally. But at the beginning, you're going to have a lot of that self-talk, and you're not going to be listening to your clients. And that's whenever a lot of times bias can come in as well, right? So we got to kind of step back out of that mindset to kind of be able to look forward. So sometimes even taking a break in the middle of a session sometimes and doing your own mindful moment. And you don't even need to do that with the client's awareness. We'll talk more about some things like that as well. Let's see. Let me see if I'm missing anything in the chats. Yeah, every time you take a drink, that is a great one. Although I will say I've been to a few schools and I've seen a lot of teachers drinking Mountain Dew or sodas. You know, maybe not drinking your soda. Maybe stick to something a little bit better, hopefully. But as a teacher, I think tending to students is an ongoing process, and it builds and erases biases, because you're seeing children grow into adults, and it's the kind of is seeing them find those traits in their own placement in the world. Absolutely. You know, that's why I've always loved working with kids, or younger adults even, is just, man, to watch them progress. And I feel like that middle school age is probably one that I would never teach. So thank you for all the teachers in middle school. But you know, I feel like that's also the time that you watch them grow with that, right? You kind of watch them move from that cognitive ability to process things into full on, you know, they really thought out, smart ass things that they say all the time, right? Because it's those middle school years that they seem to really get you and trip you up on things. Freaking kids. I love kids, by the way, but you know, it's just, you know, they can get you. They pull on your heartstrings way too much and bring out that bias sometimes. But I think you're absolutely right. Watching them grow and watching them grow out of their own biases, and maybe even form other biases at that same time, I think is pretty cool too. But I also think it's incredibly important to not let those biases into the equation of teaching. Absolutely, right? As we have to kind of draw that line and try to find that. Otherwise, it can turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I definitely want to say that, right? As I feel like somehow we've gotten away from the self-fulfilling prophecy thing. You know, if we are constantly telling our kids that they're bad, right, they're going to end up being bad kids. Things like that, right? If we are constantly having the negative self-talk that we're worthless, eventually we're going to feel very worthless, right? So I think that self-fulfilling prophecy we need to keep back at the forefront. And reflection is such an important part of teaching. Absolutely. It is an important part of professionalism almost as well. And also building skills around mindfulness and self-reflection in my students. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So let me see. Your story creates your biases. I feel like we've kind of already talked about that a lot. You know, bring awareness to your biases. It's challenging. There's tools that are out there. Find the right tool for you, and then maybe journal on top of it, meditate, do kind of what fits your lifestyle, but then manage your behavior, right? If you feel a physiological symptom, it is your responsibility as a professional to do what you need to not be biased in that particular moment. So if you need to take another mindful moment and stop the entire session for 2 minutes, that is okay, right? Manage your behavior. Another thing that I'll say about that is your facial expressions, right? You know, if somebody says something out of left field, right, sometimes you can't stop those facial expressions. I would say to mitigate that, if it happens, is to just be genuine, right? Oh, that's shocking, right? Use a word like that. Oh, that's shocking. I'm curious to learn more about that. Can you tell me a little bit more, right? So you can kind of recover, right? But I think you'll learn some of those skills as you kind of, you know, I'm sure you probably already have them working with a lot of kids, but I think that's a big piece. And I'll also say build cultural awareness. You know, this is another big one, right? Is you know, there's probably no way I could have ever met somebody from Boston being from you know, inner city Charlotte area growing up, right? I never in a million years probably would have heard that unless I could get out of my comfort zone in different places like that and really got out and started meeting people or maybe did some research. Research nowadays for cultural awareness is so all around us that we should be able to search what we need to. So if we learn something new, instead of taking social media at face value of that, we should probably do some research on it, right? We should probably look into it instead of thinking that is gold. So, and then manage your gut instincts. So this is where a lot of times you'll hear a lot of conflict, right? Is people will say, it was just my intuition. Oh, you should always use your intuition. You should always bring your intuition into the classroom. There's always that intuition. Well, if you don't know how to manage your intuition, that can be biased, racist, sexist, ageist, that whole list of things that we had. It could fill all of those. And it's your instinct, right? Your instinct is based on your story and your history and those experiences. So trust your gut instinct, but manage it, right? Know the difference between your gut instinct and the sense of those biases versus a gut instinct that, man, this kid is starving right now and I just need to get him some goldfish, right? Or whatever it is. I need to get them their Sour Patch gummies or their gummies, right? Get them everything that they need, right? Get them whatever food they need. Like that's a good example, right? Like the food, get them everything that they need for food. But if you're thinking, oh man, what would be a good biased thing to say? That you're thinking, oh, here comes another kid that's going to be hungry because of the way that they look, right? Because of the color that they came in, or their skin whenever they came in, or the clothes that they're wearing. Might be an example of the opposite of that. You're like, oh, here we go. That just happened with this one kid, so now this kid is similar, so now we're going to use that bias and generalize that. So manage those instincts, right? Not every person is going to come in with the same issues, even if they have some of the most similar traits. So let's go ahead and take 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Let's be back at 6:30. So use the bathrooms, get some water, do what you need. think we got about a minute left, but I was going to say we got about 45 minutes total left, so we're going to push through. We're going to do nonviolent communication, and we may or may not get into empathy versus sympathy, but if we don't get into it now, we'll probably move that to February 20th whenever we're on that main PD day and we have mindfulness for compassion fatigue. It'll fit really good into that course as well. So you're not missing anything is the reason why I'm saying it that way. But if we get time, we'll
empathy. I'll teach them empathy versus sympathy in 10 seconds.
in 10
Sympathy
seconds.
is about you. Empathy is about you, your client.
That's right. Pretty straightforward, right? And that is empathy versus sympathy. And you know, we do talk a little bit about compassion, right? Because there's also compassion that we want to add into that continuum of different things too. So,
and compassion is about both of you.
That's right. Todd's got all the quick answers. Man. Coaching in 10 seconds with Todd. That's what we should say. But really, you know, it's very important that we do get to that. So we will make sure that we cover those slides. You know, but I do think those are great ways to kind of jump right into understanding empathy, sympathy, and compassion in a very short way, or quick. Anyway, so let's jump into client, our nonviolent communication. So the nonviolent communication process, whenever you look at the nonviolent communication, this is really some of the language that they talk about to say, to cut out, can I help you with like some of your front office staff and things like that, right? Because help automatically shows a deficiency and that you are the savior within that moment because you can provide that help. And in reality, who knows if you can really provide it whenever you first ask it, right? So, you know, that's some of the things of just trying to change that. But ways to support self-compassion whenever we're talking about this and clients' emotions and energy is nonviolent communication. And nonviolent communication takes a moment to learn, but a lifetime to master, right? It's an ongoing process and it's something that you're always going to be working towards. And I feel like it is ever changing, right? Who would have thought 20 years ago or maybe longer for some people that in today's world that we would be using they and them to discuss one person, right? And using some of this gender neutral language, right? So it's constantly evolving and constantly changing and using nonviolent communication. So that's the reason why I say it's a lifetime to kind of learn, right? Or that's why she said that is it is a lifetime to learn because it's always going to be evolving. It's always going to be adapting. And in my opinion, that's a good thing, right? That just means we're evolving as a society and community sometimes. Nonviolent communication process, right, is, you know, we observe, we have feelings, we have needs, we have requests, right? That pretty much is the process to be able to kind of think about those pieces and then to kind of talk about it in a loop, right? And we also have to kind of jump in and start taking responsibility for some of that language and try to start making corrections. Maybe corrections isn't the right word, but really trying to start to think about how you're talking to people and how that impacts people. And there goes that word again, curiosity, right? And then talking about dogs, right? Everybody knows whenever their dog is really probably looking at them very curious, right? Because they got that side head, right? And then they're kind of like, hey, what are you doing? What are you talking about, right? Oh my gosh, right? You can make some goofy sound and they're really probably being more curious, right? They're observing that moment because either they're happy, curious, you know, they don't know what they are right now, but they know that you're talking to them and you're talking some way to them, right? And then not to be judgmental, right? There's so many ways that we can be judgmental and not even know it because of those stories. And it's our jobs to kind of make sure that we're not using that violent communication in between that. And violent sometimes sounds very aggressive, right? It doesn't have to be violent. I kind of hate the terms nonviolent communication because violent makes it sound like you're intentionally doing something to harm somebody. And I just disagree with that probably, like I said, 75% of the time because those are habits and kind of coming from that unconscious scenario. But for us, we have to take that space between stimulus and response and not be judgmental. Use all the skills that we're going to be learning throughout this coaching course to meet that person where they are instead of judging in those moments. But we're also human. So judgments versus observations, right? You are a slob. That's a pretty big judgment. But I would say how many people's probably walked into somebody's classroom and that been their first freaking thought, right? Is, man, you're a slob. I failed at eating well last week, right? That's a judgment. You never listen to me. My boss is totally unfair. And then you always are on your phone. And then the observations is you did not clean your room, right? Your classroom is not clean. That is an observation, not a judgment, right? I went out to eat 4 times last week instead of thinking like I failed to eat healthy. Well, you may have invested more in a bucket of, being there with your spouse or maybe a kid. You went to dinner one night with a kid and then you went to dinner one night with a spouse or maybe your mother, and you're just going out to eat more that week and it's an outlier week, right? So it's really trying to get into those observations more than it is passing judgment. And then also helping people to identify emotions behind that. For the therapist in the room, right, we're kind of talking about a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy as we're kind of walking through some of these pieces, right, is you got to bring awareness into it, right? There's this automatic response that's happening. Something happened and then you have an emotion behind it and then your reaction. So now something happened and now we're starting to label those things, right? And now we're starting to put emotions behind it. And we're saying, man, this observation made me feel this way, right? So that is really kind of what we're talking about with that emotion. And then beware of the I can't even say that word, facts, feelings. But it's really trying to change a lot of that negative self-talk. I feel like a failure, right? I am sure everybody here has felt like a failure at some point in their lives, right? Whether short-lived, long-lived, whatever it is. Those are normal things that we tell ourselves. Well, we got to start changing that and challenging it and turn it into, I feel frustrated when this kid does this to me, right? Or this kid did this in my classroom. Or whenever the principal volunteers me for some, wellness committee or something, or, whatever they're doing, right? And you get voluntold to do that. I feel frustrated when my principal gives me something else to do, right? Or whatever it is, my admin. I feel useless. I don't follow through with this because of X, Y, and Z, right? There's usually other things there. So it's really trying to get behind those pieces and then trying to change that language, right? Much like cognitive behavioral therapy for those folks who are again aware of those things. And then needs versus strategies. I need to go to the gym more. Well, that's a strategy, right? I need my health and strength so I can get older, right? That is a need. I need to be strong right now. I need my health right now. So kind of getting back, strategies are usually long-term, needs are today, right? What can I do now? And that's usually the way to kind of also start to distinguish between strategies and needs. Because as a coach, you're going to be looking at both. You're going to be helping them identify what their long-term behavioral goal is, and you're going to be helping with that strategy, right? So that's going to be a strategy of a long-term goal, and you're going to be trying to help them get there. So that is the reason for some of these things being in here in the coaching slides, is understanding strategy versus needs. And then also request, right? Request are action words. They're clear and concrete, direct, related to needs and feelings, right? Not related to strategy, like you need to go to the gym more. It's related to the need. You need your help today so that you can get in the floor with your grandkids or your kids, or or you can take your dog for a walk, right? Or you can pick your cat up and set it aside 400 times because it keeps getting in your way. Whatever it is, right? It's the needs that you have today. Requests are not demands. And I feel like so many times, and especially in American culture, we give a lot of request in the form of questions, right? Hey, can you go get that for me right there? And whenever a kid doesn't do it, then you get mad at them, right? So it's just kind of thinking about the request and giving that request versus asking for things and asking if they are willing to do it. And communication, right? Communication is one of the #1 barriers to everything. But here, I think this is a great illustration, right? Is somebody's down here in the pit or drowning and needs help, and Lassie goes to get help, and instead of going to get somebody and brings them back, you know, Lassie's in there processing all Lassie's past trauma, saving everybody, right? So she went and got help, or he, I can't remember if Lassie's a girl or a boy, but they went and got help. And now they're getting the wrong kind of help and you're drowning. So we have to keep that in mind. We have to be a little bit more concrete, a little bit more specific, and then make the request. Go dial 911, right? Go call 911. So demands versus requests. You need to stop smoking, right? Everybody knows that they need to stop smoking, but to sit there and tell them that on a regular basis, I don't know if that's really necessary, right? Because I think we talked about this enough, right? If we tell people to do something, they're not going to do it, right? Think about your own family. You know, for me, you know, my wife has to put laundry baskets all over the house because I refuse to put my clothes in a basket for some reason, and I don't mean to. It's just something that happens, right? So now she definitely gives demands more about putting that in the laundry basket, but demands versus request, right? Would you be willing to share with me what needs are met by smoking, right? Because now we're starting to look at the motivation behind smoking, right? And I think that's important to kind of look at whenever we're talking about coaching, because these are some of the inquiries that you're going to be expected to ask in coaching sessions, right? Whenever you're getting evaluated, these are some of the questions. I mean, these aren't literally the questions, but these are the ways to start thinking, right? Is if somebody's smoking and you say, oh, smoking, you need to quit smoking, that's a bad habit, right? That's not coaching, right? But what coaching would be, would you be willing to share with me what those needs are that you're getting from smoking? What's the satisfaction that you get from smoking? You know, things like that. So remember, request versus demands, and there's a major barrier between both. Putting it all together, right? An observation plus identifying feelings plus the underlying needs and a request equals that nonviolent communication. Now, I will say, can you add violence within this? And again, I don't like the word violence because it assumes that somebody has intention to be violent. But, you know, you could easily see to where you could almost add that in here, right? It could be that if they're not feeling angry and you tell them that they're angry, that would turn into a violent communication, right? So remember that this is kind of the formula, but that bias can still creep into that formula, right? It's still up to you to ensure that you're doing all the things that you need to. Does anybody have any questions about this side of things, or how this formula can work to help you overcome biases and nonviolent communication, or to equal nonviolent communication? Perfect. All right, client emotion and communication, nonviolent communication model, right? Make observations, not evaluations. Limit descriptions of what can be perceived, right? The 5 senses. I failed exercise last week is an evaluation, but the observation would be, I only went to the gym once last week. And I would even take only out of there, right? You went to the gym one time last week. That was great, right? You admit you were able to, you're able to get to the gym, right? That's going to be something that as coaches, we're going to have to pull out those strengths, right? Even whenever people fail, because again, we are a strength-based approach. That means that whenever they fail, and let's say they meant to go to work out 5 times that week and they only went to 1, it's not our place to pass that judgment, right? Our job would be to say and reflect, you went to the gym one time last week, right? How did that feel, right? And start to go and talk about the strengths behind even accomplishing it, even though it wasn't a full accomplishment. And I think that's important to know as well. Express feelings, not thoughts. And, you know, here's another good one too, right? What agreements would work with you this week? Or what agreements would you work with this week? So, you know, it's just kind of starting to think about how we can eliminate bias create a environment to where people can learn and grow and be able to navigate into the future. Okay, so that went a lot faster than I thought. So I will give you all an option. Do you all want to cut it short tonight and move empathy versus sympathy to another day? Or would you want to just push through tonight? Push through. Well, all right. I guess one's better than nothing. So there we go. We'll push through it. Okay. So with that being said, yeah, either. I'm open to either. Let's just go ahead and push through so we can kind of knock it out. And if anybody needs to jump, just let me know. We can handle that as we go too. So empathy versus sympathy, and I'll try to make this easy, I hope. Might as well finish. Yeah, we're here, right? Okay. So when a client seeks relief, they expect the reward of a positive therapeutic outcome. So 9 times out of 10, whenever a coach or a person comes to you to be coached, they are looking to resolve something, right? And, you know, a lot of times we think about hope. Hope, you know, a positive motivational state that is based on the sense of successful goals, goal-directed energy, and planning to meet those goals. And what that really means is we need to create an environment that can hopefully incite hope, right? That is the goal, is that our environment can do that. And the way that we're going to do it is create a coaching structure and environment that can lead to that. And a lot of times that is understanding the difference between empathy and sympathy. And a lot of times whenever we look at things and they almost mean the same, but can look completely different, right? And I don't know if people have ever seen this, right? This is either an hourglass or a glass or 2 people looking at each other. And then these 2 hands, right? And it should be working together, creating trust, right? Increasing communication, engaging in empathy and compassion, and creating and inciting that hope for that person inside of that session. We can't control it once they leave that session, but we can create that environment there and then create the tools and structure that can hopefully build them to where they can create this outside of that session. Trust, right? Trust is huge, right? It builds competence, compassion, confidentiality, reliability, and communication. These are all kind of components within trust, right? If you don't really have competence, then people aren't going to trust you, right? If you don't have compassion, people aren't going to trust you. Confidentiality, you know, the same thing. So kind of like components. And as we kind of go through empathy versus sympathy, I think trust is one of the most foundational components of being able to be there with that client and be able to understand empathy and sympathy, and definitely compassion. So here goes some different pieces whenever we look at empathy. You know, here it kind of shows the different domains within empathy, right? We have this analytical mind, we have this numerical measure, reasoning, right? This tangible cognitive style mind. And then we have the affective mind, right? The values, the meaning, the undertone, the intuition, kind of who we are. And whenever we think about breaking these down, right? The emotional component, I feel what you feel. Cognitive component, I understand what you feel, right? So there is another great piece to that. By definition, coaching is not therapy, and it does feel therapeutic when done correctly. That's right. Always remember, we'll get to this whenever we really start breaking down coaching in later sessions, but coaching is not therapy. It's not therapy, it's not mentoring, it's not any of those pieces. And we have to separate that side out a lot of times. And we also wear multiple hats many times, and we'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward too. But absolutely, if it's done right, you're able to kind of implement those different pieces, and you're also bringing it into awareness. And the more that you are able to be empathetic with those clients and compassionate, that is creating that therapeutic relationship. And And for the therapists that are out there, and maybe other folks who have heard this, right, is a therapeutic relationship is the most important part of any relationship that you have as a client there, or, client professional relationship. Is that relationship is one of the most critical pieces. So a lot of times people think it's knowledge, they think it's other things, but it's really that therapeutic relationship that creates people's ability to be able to move forward. And it's up to us to be able to do that. And a lot of times it's sticking to the therapeutic model. It's showing empathy. It's showing sympathy, right? And this goes back to Todd's. I think Todd probably built this page. I think this might be his wonderful artwork. I'm just playing. I don't think he actually built it. But, I feel your pain, right, as empathy. And then I'm sorry that you're in pain. Anytime you have to say I'm sorry or I'm, whatever, that is automatically taking it away from the client and putting it on you, right? To tell a client, even in a therapeutic, as a therapist or anything, to say, I'm sorry that you're going through this, that takes it away from the client and puts it on you, right? They don't need to know that you're sorry. They want to hear back what they're feeling, right? I feel your pain. I hear that you're struggling now. I hear that you're in pain. Those are the differences, right? And I think this video kind of illustrates that. So if you don't know who Brene Brown is, Brene Brown is a social worker by training. She has her PhD. She studied at Baylor. But Brene Brown has wrote many books and is probably the leader in the field of, why am I forgetting this off the top of my head? What is Brene Brown known for? She's oh well, now I can't remember. I'll think of it as we're done. But if you think about it, she Dare to Lead. She's wrote books on that. She has wrote all different kinds of books around those things, and she's a pretty known person around the therapeutic community. So we'll listen to her for a minute. Well, actually, let me make sure I'm sharing my sound. There we go.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right. So what are y'all taking away from that video? And I'll say she's the leading expert in vulnerability. Once she said that word, it made me think about it. But how did that video land with you all? Or what are your takeaways? Yeah, go ahead, Cal. Oh man, if you're talking, I can't hear you. I don't know. That may be me though.
Is that better?
Yep, there it is.
Perfect. I have a switch on my headset. I always forget when I press it when I go on break. So I had seen this video back when I was in college, and I think pre-teacher versus like now being in the field, it resonates a lot more now than it did then, because I've always been a person that tends to make light of whatever the situation is. That's just like who I am as a person. But it definitely, now that I'm working with students more, I've found they definitely don't like being told the positive in their bad situation. They want to know that it's a bad situation. So, yeah, so I like the way that video was characterized and the way that she talked through kind of the differences between these two attributes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for adding that because I usually ask how many people silver line bad things all the time. I feel like I'm a highly trained person in this field and I do it all the time, right? So I don't, so I think, even if you're in the coaching field or whenever you all get into the coaching field and you're doing this, don't view it as, man, I just messed up really bad. I think it's a part of who we are. It's just more bringing it into awareness, noticing that we're doing it, and then maybe try to stop silver lining it, right? Validate. That's usually what I always say: when in doubt, validate, right? And don't silver line it. Validate that this is a terrible experience that you're going through, and maybe not say I'm sorry, but kind of give that vibe that I'm here with you right now. Let's figure out what we got to do to move forward. And I think that goes so much further, especially with our kids, because a lot of times if I feel like we always think, no matter what the age of the kid is, or even learning disability wise or disability wise with kids, we automatically assume, I don't know, that they just don't know, right? Or we have to explain it to them, or all these different things. And in reality, these kids have a lot more intuition than we like to give them or give them credit for. And again, I say that for all ages, right? Not just our high school kids or anything like that. All ages across the board. They have so much more intuition than we'll ever know. And they know what's going on around us, and they know when you're not being genuine. And I think that builds a lot into this. All right. Let's see. I love Dare to Lead program. Yeah, the Dare to Lead program. So for those who don't know, Dare to Lead. So another thing with Brene Brown is she is mainly known for leadership and being vulnerable in leadership, and teaching people to do that. Dare to Lead is a great program. They have it to where you can pay for it, or what I did with some of the leaders that I've worked with in the past is you can actually get the workbook online, right? So we bought everybody the book, and then we did the workbook, and I walked everybody through the workbook. It's a very easy workbook, but if everybody's reading the book, it's pretty easy. Let's see, Blake, my takeaway: a response won't make anything better. That is probably something I'm going to steal right there, right? A response is never going to make anything better. So, she had a miscarriage, but at least she knows she can have a kid, or, whatever the scenario is, that silver lining is never going to make anything better. But that true, genuine connection will always shine light on something moving towards being better.
And with this empathy versus sympathy too, and we just saw the video on silver lining, and we'll get into it when you get into the coaching too. It's observational language. Like, someone says, I just had a miscarriage, just say what you're seeing. That's rough, or that must be upsetting for you. Just make it that non-judgment, that observation, and that lets somebody know that they're being heard without trying to make it better for them, because you can't fix it. Just as he said, you can't fix it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And, you know, to do that, you know, is it just hurts the relationship, right? Going back to that therapeutic relationship, these are the things that can hurt a therapeutic relationship. And I will say, whenever you hurt a therapeutic relationship, it's just like those referrals, right? You got to work really hard to maintain that therapeutic relationship, but it only takes one bad act or word or whatever it is to hurt that relationship for a while, and you're going to have to work harder to build that back up. And I think that's another way to look at it is we could do more harm than good sometimes by not being empathetic in those moments and making that connection with the people in front of us. So here we'll just go through some scenarios, right? And I'll go ahead and read these out loud as well. But these scenarios I think are important, and I won't go through every single one, but I'll definitely go through one that is pity, one that is sympathy, and one that is empathy. So I'll just read these, and then afterwards what we'll do is we'll kind of do a quick debrief on the three. So Betty, I am having such a difficult time with my manager. I think I'm going to get fired from my job. And then how will I afford to eat all of the healthy foods we've been discussing? Response with pity. Oh, you poor thing. It is so terrible the way your manager treats you. You should win a prize just for putting up with them, right? That is not a coaching mindset. I would also say that is probably not a therapeutic mindset if you're a therapist, and maybe not a teacher mindset, right? We probably shouldn't, and we definitely shouldn't create that us versus them mindset too, right? That's usually what I think of whenever I think of pity. It's almost like you're pointing fingers at either somebody else, or you're kind of making them feel like, oh, you should just feel so sorry for yourself, right? And in reality, they might not feel sorry for themselves at all, right? And that's what pity can create. So Betty, you know, same thing, but the sympathetic response would be, I completely understand. I remember when I worked for someone just like that about 10 years ago. It is so frustrating to not be understood. I remember it just like it was yesterday, but I got through it, and so can you. And without asking, just because of time, the biggest thing that always stands out to me is how many times you said I if you use a sympathetic response, right? So if you catch yourself saying I on a regular basis, giving sympathetic response or giving responses, that is probably more on the sympathetic side, right? And not necessarily on the empathetic side. Kind of going back to Todd's original thought, right? Is sympathy is about them, empathy is about you, right? And then now looking at the empathetic response, right? Same question, response is empathy. It does sound like a difficult time, and I hear how worried you are, and while also really wanting to keep your positive momentum going, right? So now whenever you read the empathy response and see all of those, you know, I guess what stands out to you whenever you think about these different responses, right? From pity all the way to empathy, what really stands out to you all as you kind of look at those responses? Or heard those responses?
I can say I've heard, and I didn't realize, I guess, that the sympathy response against the empathy response, but I've heard that sympathy response from somebody just recently about, you know, a situation. And wow, I didn't even think of it as that way.
It's wild, right? It's a change in the way that we think sometimes, or the way that we see things a lot of times. And you know, a lot of times I think too, there's the misconception of empathetic versus sympathetic responses, right? Empathy shows concern, but also gives power to the person, recognizing they still want to be healthy. That's right. Empathy is validating, absolutely. You know, I just think that's kind of important too, Kelly, to that point, is validating, right? It's just like I said, when in doubt, you'll hear me say it sometimes, when in doubt, reflect, but really what I mean is when in doubt, validate, right? Always validate. I think that always shows the empathy. It builds that therapeutic response and allows us to be able to grow. So someone who is empathetic is curious without being demanding, is interested without being intrusive, is compassionate without being condescending, and is persistent without being impatient. That sounds almost like an impossible task whenever you look at that, right? But as us as coaches, this is what we should strive to be right here, right? Is constantly doing that. And I'll also say, it's not that you shouldn't ever provide sympathetic responses in your coaching abilities or coaching. You should really think about it more that this is a way and a lens to kind of look through as you're building your coaching competencies. And as you're building your coaching practice, it's like, oh, okay, well, I should be curious, right? I should be interested. I should show compassion. And I need to also make them stick to their goals, right? And make them kind of stick to that. That sounds more demanding, but you know, that's really what we're here to do. Let me see, I think I'm going to go through these real quick and show this one. And then we'll show one video depending on the length of that video, and then we'll call it a night. But you know, this kind of gets to some of the scenarios that we were talking about, right? And this is, you know, the pity, right? Is I acknowledge your suffering. And then sympathy, I care about your suffering. And then I feel your suffering. And then I want to relieve your suffering. And then what I like about this is it shows the compassion, right? And the more that you kind of go down the engagement track, the more you have to move towards from pity to compassion. And that is really one of the main goals of this. And now we're going to watch a video. Let me make sure, let me start it and see how long it is. So it's only a minute. And this person, her name is Dr. Neff. She's a psychologist, and her work is in self-compassion. So she is probably the leading expert in the field in self-compassion, and is somebody that is a great resource. And if you ever look her up, she has like assessments and different things online as well. So anyway, I'll go ahead and show this real quick. Nope.
But the idea is in the moment of struggle, not like, you know, in a separate time when you're meditating, or you can do it then too, but in the heat of the moment, you remind yourself of the three components of compassion. Being mindful that you're having a hard time, remembering this is part of life, it's not just me, this is part of being human. And then bringing kindness to yourself, right? It could often feel weird at first, absolutely. It often feels very strange to speak to yourself like you'd speak to a good friend. It can feel fake and phony at first, just to normalize that. But eventually, you start to form new habits, and it starts to feel natural to be kind to yourself as opposed to awkward. And if you really work with this practice, if you really work on integrating self-compassion into your life, what the research shows is that, like I said, it's a tremendous source of resilience, coping, self-confidence, and motivation.
So how many people feel that they're self-compassionate to themselves? Yeah. How many people feel like they could probably work on this a whole lot more? Yeah. I'll definitely say I'm in that as well. I'm not as good as Todd, right? I definitely, you know, but I will also say this is also an area that is ongoing, right? So don't ever think it's a pass-fail type of mindset. It is most certainly an ongoing and continuum of compassion, I guess you could say, the self-compassion. Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
No, that was just me raising my hand when you asked that, and I don't know how to get rid of it.
You're good, sorry. But yeah, absolutely, right? We all need to be able to look at this more, right? And to kind of have some of these types of things, right? To have that mindful moment, to have that sense of humanity, right? We are all going to be learning new things moving forward. That is not going to stop us from not learning new things. You know, one thing that people who know me best is I do not fear failure. I have a different relationship with failure. I love to fail because I can learn so much more from failure than I ever can from success. And you know, that's a different mindset to get in. But I feel like as you're learning and moving forward in the coaching field, that is a mindset to have, right? Is to be able to have that common humanity that we all are flawed in some way, and we're going to have flaws as we move forward in learning new things as society. So, and then of course, kindness, right? A lot of times we beat ourselves up, especially whenever we have that inner critic, right? That gremlin in the back of your head, especially whenever you all are going to be doing coaching, practicing, and then whenever you sit down and do a recording and you record yourself, right? That inner critic is probably going to be going haywire. And then if you're a person who's going to watch the video after you record it, I highly recommend not to. But if you do, especially unless it is like your final grade or something, but you know, the first one, I wouldn't even review it. I would just send it on in and make sure, you know, because you're going to get feedback based on that performance, and then they're gonna let you know. So just kind of keep that in mind. Have kindness and compassion for yourself, and most importantly, you know, love yourself, right? Show self-love. There is a practice that if you all want more information on, please reach out to me, but is a love and kindness practice. And I highly recommend that most people start their day with a love and kindness practice. And most of the time, I will not say 100% of the time, but in love and kindness practice, you first show somebody else love. And I always tell people to, if you have somebody that day that you're going to see, or somebody at work or at home that you're having problems with, start every single day with a love and kindness practice and show that person love for that first one, and then show yourself love. And I guarantee you that your days will get a lot better. And, you know, Brene Brown suggests that shame is bred by harsh, self-critical judgment and is often kept hidden in secret to hide vulnerability. So fortunately, a good relationship founded on trust and authenticity can help a client be more willing to experience and share vulnerabilities, followed by self-kindness, right? So we have to also do this for our clients and almost lead by example in those moments too. And, you know, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. And I think this is one of the most, you know, powerful quotes in all of self-compassion, right? As you can't have compassion without self-compassion. And self-determination is vital for empowerment. All right. Let's see, what questions or comments or anything in the last few minutes that we have here together? Any questions, comments, concerns? All right.
I liked the term suffer well.
Suffer well. That's right. We should get T-shirts for that. That could be maybe our graduation T-shirts or something. I don't know. Suffer well in D2. All right. Well, then I guess we can go ahead and jump off here. I'll see you all. I don't know. Everybody should have the invites, but if you don't have them, let me know. If you don't have access to Teams, let me know. You know, some of those administrative things, let me know. And then I'll see you at the next class. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night, y'all.